She was a girl from another time, thrown into an ancient world to become a pawn in a royal game. Attending a friend's birthday party, she found herself inexplicably transported to 600 BC Mesopotamia after touching a mysterious necklace. To survive and find a way home, she became a slave to a princess who made her a tantalizing offer: travel to Babylon, for its king was a demigod who could grant her passage back to her world. But it was a lie. As their caravan neared its destination, they were ambushed, and she was nearly killed in a foreign land. In the ensuing chaos, she realized the horrifying truth. The princess had used her as a body double, sending her to die in her place. Just as her life was about to end, she was saved by a man who seemed like a god. The legendary war king from the history books, Nebuchadnezzar II. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if this was the start of a fairy tale romance. But a cold dread washed over her as she saw the look in his eyes. This man was ready to kill her. He seized her, his voice a low growl as he promised to make her submit to his will. He could be gentle, almost tender, captivated by her sunny hair, and comforting her when she cried. But she was no damsel in distress. She was lively, witty, and determined to escape this nightmare. Her story begins in 601 B.C., a time of legends where the new king Nebuchadnezzar was set to marry the princess of Medes. For our heroine, Amidith, it had been over a decade since she was ripped from her own time at her friend Andrew's party. All because she touched an ancient heirloom. Desperate, she was summoned by the mysterious princess, who somehow knew she was from a faraway land. Amidith confessed her desire to go home, and the princess made her the deal of a lifetime: accompany her to Babylon, where the demigod king could help her find her way. And so she sold herself into servitude, only to realize the beautiful dress she was given was a costume for her own execution. Suddenly, assassins swarmed their procession, declaring them surrounded. Her guards were slaughtered, and the attackers tore open the sedan chair, looking for the princess. They held up a portrait, and to Amidith's horror, they pointed right at her. The face in the portrait was her own. The princess had set her up, a perfect decoy for a political assassination. Just as an assassin lunged, an arrow pierced his back. The king of Babylon had arrived. The attackers scattered in fear, crying out the name King Barbarian. Hope sparked in her chest. This was the man the princess said could help her. A guard reported a survivor, and through the blinding sun she saw him, a powerful figure on a magnificent horse. He was Nebuchadnezzar II, the creator of the New Babylon, the very king who built a wonder of the world for the woman he loved. He seemed so gentle, nothing like the ruthless warrior from her history books. As his men cleared the dead, he approached her and she tried to maintain her composure. But then he looked closer, his eyes lingering on her golden hair. A predatory smile crossed his lips as he whispered that from this day forward her name was Amidith, and she would be his princess. He welcomed her to his country, pulling her into a possessive embrace that sent a shiver of fear down her spine. She blushed, completely bewildered by his forwardness. This man was a stranger, yet he acted as if he owned her. She wanted to scream, to tell him she wasn't a princess, and just wanted to go home to the man she already loved. His expression darkened, sensing her resistance. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, informing her that since she now stood on his land, she had become his property and had no right to refuse him. In an instant, the gentle king vanished, revealing the tyrant beneath. And she knew she was no longer a lost girl, but the captive of a legendary king. Princess Midi arrives in the kingdom of Babylon, a land she's only ever seen in historical descriptions. And the reality is far more shocking and awesome than she ever imagined. The king of Babylon greets her, his satisfaction evident as he boasts that this is his kingdom, a land they will share once they are married. Lost in wonder, Midi barely registers his words, snapping back to attention only when he calls her princess, a title she's not yet used to. Inside the grand palace, he is welcomed back by his subjects. Before he turns his attention back to her, lounging on his throne, he beckons her forward with a lazy, commanding finger. He pulls her into a possessive embrace, declaring her the princess of Babylon and whispering that their wedding will be in a week, eager to open his gift from her homeland. In a flash of revulsion, Midi slaps him hard across the face, the sound echoing through the stunned court. The fury instantly melts into sheer terror as she realizes she's assaulted a king who could execute her on a whim. The king's voice is low and laced with menace as he asks how she dares, telling her she's playing with fire. Thinking fast, Midi concocts a desperate lie, claiming she was merely testing him. She launches into a wild story about a wise Eastern emperor who valued honesty, arguing that she had to know if her future husband was a great king or a tyrant who couldn't handle criticism. Her audacious gamble pays off in an unexpected way. The king bursts into unrestrained laughter, utterly amused by her nerve. But his amusement is fleeting. His expression hardens as he coldly orders his guards to send the princess to prison to be executed tomorrow. As Midi is dragged away screaming in protest, the king's advisors condemn her as a disgrace to Babylon. The king sips calmly from a golden goblet, musing that simply killing her is too cheap. He declares that they should make the people believe she is a curse, a beautiful girl who brought ruin to the country by striking their king. A thought that sends Midi into a spiral of tearful despair. One advisor objects, warning against underestimating her homeland of Anmedes. But others roar for war, calling the king a tyrant for even considering leniency. With a single sharp command for quiet, the king silences the entire room. And his cowardly advisors immediately switch to fawning praise, calling him a god of beauty who could never be a tyrant. The king dismisses them with a weary sigh. Alone on his balcony, he reflects on Midi's bold accusation of him being a tyrant, a small, intrigued smile playing on his lips. Meanwhile, Midi, now a prisoner, decides she won't go down without a fight, vowing to escape and find a way home. She breaks out of her room and heads for the tallest tower in the world, believing it holds a clue. Peeking inside, she hears splashing water and a voice, realizing with a jolt that someone is there. She finds a man bathing in a large pool and panics, desperately trying to hide. Cowering behind a statue, she prays he can't see her. The man mistakes the sound for a cat and dismisses it. Allowing Midi to breathe a sigh of relief, thanking the goddess for her luck, she turns to flee. But a voice commands her to stop right there. The silver-haired man demands to know who she is and how she got into the tower. He confronts her, his eyes locking onto her features, the blonde hair of the goddess Ishtar and the golden eyes of the death goddess Elishkigel. He grabs her arm, his grip like iron as he repeats his demand. Furious at his savagery, Midi declares that she is Princess Andy Edith and questions how he dares touch her. The man's eyes widen slightly at her title before he calmly asks why she is here, knowing the king intends to kill her and questioning if she's trying to escape. Realizing he knows her fate, Midi tries to bolt, but he unleashes a blast of light that freezes her in place, her body refusing to obey her commands. The priest of heaven, Shamshi, who guarded Babylon, watches from a tower as chaos erupts below. The princess is gone again. In the throne room, Princess Amiitis is a sobbing mess, having been swiftly recaptured after her failed escape. She is forced to face the imposing king, her mind screaming that he's a bloodthirsty monster who has fought all over the country. Trembling, she begs him to forgive her, concocting a desperate lie that she only wished to pray in the highest tower one last time. He approaches her, a cold glint in his eyes, remarking on how clever she is before forcefully grabbing her chin, sneering that her sister Midi clearly taught her nothing about obedience. He shoves her away violently, and with a chilling smile, he declares that the prison guard who let her escape has lost his duty and will be executed for his failure, adding that the princess will learn a lesson by watching. The brutal reality of this slave society crashes down on Amiitis. An innocent man is dead because of her desperate bid for freedom. Before she can even process the horror, the king scoops her into his arms. She struggles wildly, calling him a murderer and demanding to be let go. But he simply carries her to her chambers. He throws her onto the bed, his voice a low growl as he promises to take away her thoughts and her will to make her entirely his. Amiitis is paralyzed with fear, whimpering for someone to help her as he towers over her. He finally leaves, issuing a chilling command to her maids. Take care of Princess Amiitis because if she escapes again, they will all die. That night, under a full moon that seems stained with blood, Shamshi observes the palace from a balcony, sensing an emerging war. He knows the future queen of Babylon is the key, and looking at the moon, he decides with cold certainty that he must stop the marriage. In her room, Amiitis' fear has turned to steely resolve. She knows these people are terrible and she has to get away from the king to survive. So when a maid brings her meal, she spots an opportunity, grabbing a long sash from her dress. She ties it to the balcony and begins her descent, but her hands slip and she plummets to the ground with a terrified shriek, landing in a heap. She looks up to see a young boy staring at her, who asks if she's from the palace. Amiitis immediately hushes him, confessing that she snuck out. She asks who he is, and he explains that his name is Bug and that he and his friends are slaves with no parents, showing her an empty begging bowl. Struck with guilt and pity, Amiitis realizes the history textbooks were lying about the king caring for his people and offers them the bread she managed to bring. The other starving children begin to grab at her, but Bug steps in, telling them to stop snatching because she is one of them now. Amiitis thanks him for his help, smiling as she notes that Bug is a strange name. The boy then offers to show her a place where the palace guards won't find her, leading her to the slums. He explains they are all orphans and they live in a shelter his big brother found for them. He points ahead, saying his brother is right there, and Amiitis' blood runs cold as she recognizes the cloaked figure handing out bread. The high priest, Shamshi. He turns and his calm expression shifts to surprise, asking Princess Amiitis why she is here. She braces for the worst, but he merely remarks that he knows she isn't a typical princess, but he didn't expect her to do such things, not questioning her escape. A wave of relief washes over her as he distributes food to the children. He quietly observes her kindness, thinking to himself that she truly must not marry the king. As he prepares to leave, Amiitis desperately pleads with him not to reveal her location, but he only says he will think about it, infuriating her with his indecisiveness. Just then, the sky opens up and rain pours down. A well bursts, sending a torrent of floodwater through the slums. The slaves panic, crying that they are doomed. But a memory flashes in Amyidas's mind from her modern life. And with a surge of purpose, she stands up, telling the terrified children to hold on because she can help them. Meanwhile, Shamshi arrives at the palace where a guard informs him the king wants to see him. Inside the throne room, the king is seething, demanding to know where the princess is. The terrified maids insist they don't know, and with a flick of his wrist, he declares them useless and orders their execution. But at that very moment, in the chaos of the flood, Amyidus frantically draws a detailed diagram on a piece of slate, remembering the manuscript for a wooden water wheel, a design she knows will save them all. As Princess Amyidus pores over her designs for a water wheel, confident it won't be too hard to build, her brother Bug peeks in, asking what she's up to. She lights up, telling him his timing is perfect because she desperately needs his help. Meanwhile, in a dark memory, the king's high priest, Shamshi, warns His Majesty that marrying Princess Amyidus will surely bring disaster to Babylon. He coldly suggests they tell Medes that the princess ran away and died suddenly, ensuring she can never return and cementing it as the best choice for the kingdom's future. The king, Nibur, confronts his priest, his eyes blazing with suspicion as he demands to know why Shamshi has become so strange. He scoffs at the idea that a single woman could ruin his kingdom, warning Shamshi that this is the last time he will tolerate being underestimated. Shamshi can only bow his head in submission as a guard rushes in to report that the city's well has been destroyed in a rainstorm. Back in the present, the villagers heave the massive water wheel into the river, their voices filled with doubt but also a flicker of hope. An old man and woman mutter their skepticism, wondering what good a giant wooden wheel could possibly do. Amyidus watches with a knot of anxiety in her stomach. The wheel is solid, but the river is in its flood season, and without modern machinery to secure it, the wooden supports will eventually rot and give way. Just then, Bug arrives with a comforting snack of fresh oysters, which she gratefully accepts. As she savors the tender meal, a brilliant idea strikes her like lightning. Oysters and their incredibly strong shells. She excitedly grabs Bug, asking if there's a fisherman who sells them. He beams, offering to gather them for her for free. Her mind flashes to a memory from her past life, recalling how shellfish secrete a viscous substance to adhere to rocks, forming a dense, natural solid cement over time. This is it, the solution to her problem. With renewed determination, the final countdown begins, and the villagers give one last mighty push, successfully launching the water wheel into the current. It works perfectly, and the crowd erupts in joyous cheers, lifting Amyidus into the air and hailing her not just as Princess Amyidus, but as their Queen of Heaven. From a distance, King Nibur watches the celebration with a detached gaze, his people murmuring about the strange monster in the water. He turns to a guard and asks if he designed the contraption, but the man trembles, insisting no human could build such a thing. Another man gets a swift kick for his ignorance and stammers that it was built by a woman who recently moved into the slums. A cold smile plays on Nibur's lips as he commands his men to bring her to him. Unaware of the approaching danger, Amyidus is gloating about her genius, proud to have built a water wheel in 601 BC and brought new technology to a kingdom whose king only understands slaughter. Suddenly, Bug bursts in with a look of terror, screaming that the Imperial guards are coming and she must hide immediately. But it's too late. Nibur's voice rings out, declaring that the slaves who failed to protect the well will be severely punished. His guards round up the terrified villagers who plead their innocence as they are dragged away. A guard threatens them, demanding they reveal the designer or they will all suffer. The crowd freezes in fear, unsure what to do. Unable to watch them be punished for her actions, Amyidus steps out from her hiding place, shouting that the water wheel is her creation and they have nothing to do with it. Nibur's smirk widens. He knew it was her, his escaped wife, Princess Amyidus. She furiously accuses him of being a tyrant who kills without reason, a sight he finds both flattering and surprising. He offers her a chilling ultimatum: return to the palace with him and he'll let the people go, but she only has 3 seconds to decide before he changes his mind and kills them all. Trapped and furious, Amyidus agrees, but only if he rewards the people for fixing the well and provides for the orphans, declaring them the true wealth of Babylon. Amused by her audacity, Nibur grants her request, reminding her that everything in Babylon, including these slaves, is his property. He holds out his hand, and with a heavy heart, she takes it, leaving a devastated Bug behind. On the journey back, she warns the king not to push her, threatening to take her own life and forever brand him as the man who murdered his own wife. He simply smiles, telling her he's changed his mind. Her savage, intriguing nature has won him over. He will marry her for real. He leans in close, whispering about his fake wife, and a cold dread washes over Amyidus as she wonders if he knows her true identity. She's now grounded, a prisoner in a gilded cage, surrounded by so many guards that escape seems impossible. Days pass without a word from the king, and she begins to think the high priest might be her only way out. But as she tries to sneak away, her own maids block her path with crossed swords, reminding her that they were almost executed because of her last escape attempt. Racked with guilt, she abandons the plan, only for her eyes to fall on the maid's linen clothing, sparking a new, daring idea. Meanwhile, Niebuhr grills his ministers about the water wheel. They admit the structure is simple yet brilliant, and that none of them could have ever conceived of it. He sneers, calling them a bunch of losers for being outmatched by a princess from a small kingdom. He commands them to build a better version, refusing to let Babylon be outshined, all while pondering the true origins of his mysterious fiancée. Using a rope made of linen sheets, Amyitis escapes her room, silencing her terrified maids by sweetly promising to return soon after visiting her fiancé, adding a dark threat that the king will kill them if they raise an alarm. She decides to wait for him in his bedroom. Making her way to his private residence, Niebuhr returns to find her there, demanding to know what she's doing. Putting on a charming act, she claims she missed him and couldn't wait any longer, hoping for their wedding to be held as soon as possible. He raises an eyebrow, noting his fiancée seems to have changed, and begins to remove his rope. Amyitis panics, covering her eyes and asking what he's doing. As he slips into the bath, he coolly informs her it's time she learned how to serve her husband. Thinking fast, she drops the act and puts on a sly smile, agreeing to serve Niebuhr. The use of his name startles him, but she explains it's to feel closer, suggesting he call her Wendy in return. Leaning close, she whispers that Wendy is a special name only used by her mother and those she trusts. Niebuhr's expression turns to ice. He leans in, his voice dangerously low, and points out that her mother, Queen Clyde, died in childbirth. Amyitis freezes, the blood draining from her face as she realizes her fatal mistake. Her mind races as Niebuhr smirks, wondering if he knows her real name or is just testing her, but she quickly concocts a story, telling him her mother used to call her Wendy. The lie barely leaves her lips before he yanks her into the pool, pulling her close against his bare chest. He claims he doesn't want his wife dwelling on sad memories and decides to cheer her up by licking a tear from her eye, promising to cure her wounds. Flustered and angry, Amyitis shoves him away, calling him a pervert who only thinks of sex, but he just laughs at her feigned vulnerability. Leaning closer, he drops a bombshell that shatters her world. The story of her mother's death was a complete lie, she is still alive. Amyitis freezes in shock, realizing she's been tricked. He cruelly muses about a suitable punishment for her deception, suggesting selling her to slavers or skinning her alive, all while laughing at the terror on her face. Satisfied with her fear, he pats her head, declaring she's done a good job and will now serve him in his shower. He stands and walks away, leaving her trembling in the water. When she calls out that her legs are numb and asks for help, he just smirks, accusing her of being good at seducing men. She protests that she just needs a hand, not for him to carry her. But he lifts her into his arms anyway and throws her onto the bed, ordering the servants to strip her clothes. As maids dress Niebuhr in royal attire, he invites her to see the new water wheel, casually asking if she intends to go out in her nightgown, forcing her to scramble to get changed. Amyitis feels a small sense of relief that he doesn't seem intent on killing her, planning to use the trip to check on her friend Bug. Meanwhile, a message is delivered by pigeon to an urban defense guard, who panics upon reading it and rushes to warn the palace of an assassin in Babylon. However, he's stopped by the king's younger brother, Prince Gale, who coolly dismisses the threat, completely confident that his brother is invincible. By the beautiful Euphrates River, Amyitis playfully suggests that she and Niebuhr catch fish. He scoffs at the idea, reminding her of his royal status, but she cheekily challenges him, asking if the great king of Babylon is afraid of a little water. Annoyed but intrigued, Niebuhr warns her not to let him down, only to immediately turn the tables by ordering her into the water to catch fish for him like a servant. He finds her frustrated efforts amusing and leans in close, whispering her secret name, Wendy, enjoying how flustered she becomes as her plan to embarrass him completely backfires. Sitting by the river, she tries to teach him a lesson about unity, explaining how they caught the fish together and how the kingdom itself can only be built through cooperation. The sentiment triggers a memory of his father's words about uniting the people, a concept Niebuhr inwardly scoffs at as a foolish weakness. He turns her words back on her, his eyes glinting as he leans in and asks if she's saying his country is magnificent and powerful. As she protests, an assassin watches from the shadows, vowing revenge on Niebuhr. Their tense moment is interrupted by a crying child who brings devastating news. Bug has been tricked and sold to a slave trader. Amyitis is horrified and vows to save him. But Niebuhr stops her, questioning why he should bother saving another man's life. He explains that the slave night is run by powerful merchants. He has no desire to anger over a single slave. Seeing her desperation, he makes a cruel offer. If she can please him with her mouth, he'll consider it. As he turns to leave, she grabs his arm in desperation, agreeing to his terms and rising up to kiss him. He smirks at her failed attempt but relents, agreeing to go to the slave night. After sending the child home with a promise to save Bug, they arrive at the night market. Ameitis is horrified to find herself dressed in a revealing dancer's costume, a supposed disguise that she knows will make her the center of attention. Nibor simply states the dress is perfect. Standing before the slave auction house, he explains that he can only enter by bringing a slave. Her blood runs cold as he leans in with a wicked smile, telling her that exotic blonde girls are a hot commodity on the market. He shoves her forward, announcing to the guards that he is a businessman and she is his merchandise, asking for entry into the slave night. The moment Nibor steps into the slave market, women swoon, some even offering to become his slave just to be near him. But for Ameitis, trapped on the dirty ground, this world is a nightmare she begs not to be left in. An owner grabs her, threatening to rip out her tongue for yelling, but Nibor intervenes with chilling calm, warning the man not to damage such a rare commodity. He grabs Ameitis, dipping his finger in red paint to mark her face, declaring she is his. Her flicker of hope dies as he whispers that he plans to sell her for a high price, and she can only think of him as a jerk. She's led down a dark, terrifying slave's passage, the grim reality of this society crashing down on her. Pushing through a crowd of bodies, she frantically searches for someone, her eyes landing on a familiar hooded figure. She calls out for Andre, but it's not him, it's her brother Bug, who is stunned to see her there. He tearfully asks if she's selling herself to save him, but before she can explain, a vile slave owner grabs her, his eyes glinting with greed as he notes her blonde hair matches that of Princess Ameitis. He offers 5 adult slaves for her and tries to touch her hair. But Bug lunges forward, biting the man's arm fiercely. The boy is thrown aside as the man's intentions become horribly clear. He muses aloud about checking if she's a virgin, a fact that would lower her price. He orders his men to tie her up for inspection, but a hand clamps down on his wrist like a vise. Nibor has returned, his voice dripping with venom as he asks how anyone dares touch his precious commodity. He pulls her behind him, his sudden concern making her heart skip a beat in confusion. The fat merchant Semalim puffs up his chest, threatening the little Hara trader, unaware he's just threatened the king of Babylon himself. Nibor just smirks, asking Ameitis if she'd like to know what human flesh tastes like. But before his threat can land, an assassin lunges from the crowd, screaming for the Babylonian king to go to hell. The assassin's knife sinks deep into Nibor's chest, yet the king doesn't even flinch, merely stating the attack was too slow before casually stepping on the downed Assyrian. The world stops as Semalim realizes his mistake, falling to his knees as Nibor reveals this was all a trap to lure out the assassin's accomplice. He calls for the second conspirator to show themselves, and across the courtyard the real Andre clutches Bug, holding a knife to his throat. Andre demands Ameitis in exchange for the boy, but Nibor laughs, revealing her true identity and offering the princess as a hostage instead. Andre seizes the opportunity, grabbing Ameitis and pressing the blade to her throat. But Nibor simply scoffs, questioning if the stupid Assyrian thinks he'd risk his country for a mere woman. An arrow whistles through the air, and a sharp pain blossoms in Ameitis' chest as she looks down at the fletching protruding from her body. In that moment she realizes she is and always has been the one who gets abandoned. Her life flashes before her eyes, the orphanage, the brief joy of adoption, and the crushing pain of being returned because she was no longer needed. She remembers Andre telling her to be strong, and as her consciousness fades, she grabs onto Nibor's clothing, begging him to take her home. She awakens in a lavish room, alive, but the agony in her shoulder is real. When Nibor approaches, feigning concern, her terror turns to rage. She slaps his hand away, screaming at the cold-blooded hypocrite who shot her without a moment's hesitation. Unfazed, Nibor summons the high priest, Shamshi, who heals her wound with a touch of magic. Shamshi explains the king is a master archer and chose the least harmful option, but his words ring hollow. The priest then reveals something that shatters her anger. Bug had stabbed the king in retaliation, but Nibor spared his life, proof that he treats her differently. Horrified that Bug is in danger, she runs from the room to find him, colliding with a red-haired man who watches her with intense interest. He is Prince Gale, and as Shamshi chides him for staring, the prince merely smiles, musing that the princess is as beautiful as her reputation suggests before asking a chilling question. Would his brother, the king, be angry if he were to take her for himself? King Nibor demands to know who ordered the assassination, but the young boy, Bug, defiantly declares that no one sent him. He acted alone to avenge his sister, whom he believes the king killed. A flicker of annoyance crosses Nibor's face as he pieces the plot together. First the damaged well, and now this boy sent to kill him, a clear sign he's been underestimated. He scoffs at the boy's story, holding up the ornate dagger and questioning how a mere slave orphan could possibly own such an exquisite weapon. Bug flashes back to a mysterious hooded figure who gave him the blade. claiming it could pierce the king of Babylon's defenses. The man had manipulated him, saying it was a tool for protection and mentioning that his sister and friends seemed unhappy with the king. Snapping back to the present, Bug lies, insisting he just found it on the road and wanted revenge for his sister's death. Nibor, utterly unimpressed with this display of foolishness, calls him a stupid and impulsive kid before lifting him effortlessly by the head. He reveals the boy's foolishness, pointing out the dagger's pattern is uniquely Egyptian, proof that he's been used as a pawn by those cowardly enough to hide behind a child for a capital crime. Suddenly, a voice cuts through the tension as Amides runs in, pleading with Nibor to stop. Bug stares in disbelief, his world turning upside down as he sees his sister is alive and well. Nibor's gaze turns cold as he addresses Amides, accusing her of being an accomplice to this Assyrian slave who tried to stab him with an Egyptian dagger. Bug desperately cries out that he's not a traitor, a plea his sister echoes with surprising ferocity. Amides retorts that if Bug is a traitor for caring for his siblings, then Nibor must be one for abandoning his own. The accusation triggers a painful memory for her, a time when she was an orphan named Wendy, abandoned and disbelieved by everyone. With newfound resolve, she stares at the king and declares her complete trust in Bug, stating that he has a big heart and is her friend. Nibor feels a sting sharper than any blade. Her words hurt more than the wound, as it's clear she doesn't care about his injury in the slightest. He coldly asks what she's willing to sacrifice for her precious friend. Thinking of her secret designs, Amides declares she'll give up everything and begins to remove her dress. Nibor is flabbergasted, enraged that she possesses a natural talent for annoying him and would debase herself for a slave. He grabs her wrist, demanding to know if this is her brilliant idea of wisdom. Before she can answer, he leans in, whispering that he won't let her wisdom go to waste before forcefully kissing her. Amides is frozen in shock, her first kiss stolen by a man she can't stand, and she furiously shoves him away. As she and Bug are reeling, Nibor suddenly staggers and collapses to the ground, unconscious. At that exact moment, his brother Gale storms in with guards, demanding to know why his brother has fainted. His eyes lock on Amides, immediately accusing her of being involved. Shamshi, the high priest, warns Gale to be careful, reminding him of Amides' status in Babylon. Amides coolly denies the accusation, arguing she would have fled if she were guilty. Unconvinced, Gale orders them both to prison, declaring he'll find the truth and execute them if necessary while he takes his brother to be healed. As Nibor is carried away, the Egyptian dagger slips from his clothes, and Gale picks it up with a dark, calculating look in his eyes. Nibor's consciousness drifts into a bizarre dream where he's a small boy again, Nebuchadnezzar Roman II, in a world of luminous buildings and short, fat fingers. In this strange new reality, he sees a young Wendy, his Amides, being bullied by other orphans. Consumed by a sense of justice, he intervenes, punching the lead bully and scaring them off. He turns to the trembling girl, asking if she's okay, but she faints in his arms. He offers her his coat, and she tearfully explains she's been abandoned with nowhere to go. Without hesitation, he tells her crying is useless and that she can live with him. The dream shatters, and Nibor wakes with a start, the memory feeling intensely real. Meanwhile, in a cold prison cell, Amides and Bug sit in despair. Bug apologizes for dragging her into his mess, but she reassures him, certain Nibor wouldn't harm the innocent. With a confident smirk, she easily picks the lock on her shackles. Bug urges her to escape alone, calling himself a burden who committed a capital crime. But Amides refuses to let him give up, inspired by someone who once told her the same. They sneak out of the cell, determined to check on the king. On the way, Bug cheekily asks if she likes Nibor after seeing them kiss, causing her to blush and vehemently deny it. Their escape is cut short when they run straight into Shamshi, the high priest, who remarks that the Babylonian prison is like a second home to her. Panicked, Amides tells Bug to run, but Shamshi is faster and snaring her with a cord of light. She cleverly points out her hair is caught in his spell, and to her surprise, he loosens it. Before she can react, a guard arrives to inform them that the king is awake and has summoned her. Back in the king's chambers, Gale is furious that Nibor's first request is to see Amides, but Nibor calmly states he needs to ask her about the dagger. Gale lies, claiming there is no dagger and that both she and the slave should be executed immediately. Knowing his brother is hiding something, Nibor dismisses him. Alone, Gale marvels at his brother's swift recovery, a sinister smile spreading across his face as he clutches the hidden Egyptian dagger, eager to inspect it himself. Shamshi calmly intervenes, declaring the boy Bug is coming with him and that he won't be tortured for a confession. He assures Amides that he will personally determine the boy's guilt at the temple, keeping him as an under guard in the meantime. Amides is overjoyed, promising Bug that the kind priest will ensure his exoneration. Later, under a beautiful star-filled sky, she marvels at the view, noting it's just as stunning as the sky in her homeland of Medes. She asks Shamshi about the king's condition, only for him to give a pious, dismissive answer about Babylon being blessed by the true God. Amides internally scoffs, calling him a swindler who predicts disaster from beautiful women. Shamshi, however, is consumed by his own dark thoughts. This woman is a threat to Babylon, especially since even his healing magic doesn't work on the king after her arrival. Since he can't persuade the king to kill her, he muses that he might have to do it himself, his hand glowing with power. Amyitis, oblivious, calls him sweet for letting Bug work in the temple, guessing he also didn't tell the king about her escape. His power dissipates as he's caught off guard by her words, remembering a past voice telling him he was a kind person who deserved to be cherished. Amyitis continues, telling him he can trust her and give Bug a second chance because they are both great people. As she turns to leave, Shamshi instinctively grabs her arm, telling her not to go. He immediately questions his own actions, realizing he's stopping the king's future queen, and loosens his grip. But before the moment can resolve, King Nibur suddenly appears from the shadows, thanking Shamshi for bringing Amyitis to him before effortlessly sweeping her into his arms. Nibur casually throws her over his shoulder, ignoring her protests that she isn't cargo. He reassures her that the Egyptian's little trick didn't hurt him, and cheekily asks how she plans to repay him for letting an assassin go for her sake. Leaning in close, he corners her against a wall, leaving Amyitis to instantly retract her thoughts about his kindness. He's nothing more than a man who uses threats to get what he wants. Resigned, she figures she's already lost her first kiss anyway, but Nibur suddenly claims to be dizzy from his injury, asking her to take care of him. She agrees, and he promptly falls into a peaceful sleep. Her heart flutters, thinking he only let her go because he was exhausted. Meanwhile, news of the incident spreads, and a noblewoman named Anita is aghast, dropping her goblet in shock to learn the princess from Meads is in the king's bedroom. Her companion, Prince Gale, tries to calm her, but she's panicked, knowing that polygamy is illegal and the king is supposed to marry her. The next morning, a guard tells Chancellor Brody that the king is still sleeping, an unprecedented event. Amyitis awakens in bed with Nibur, who is very much awake and holding her close. As she panics, the door bursts open. It's Chancellor Brody, who has returned from inspecting the city. He's stunned to find a woman in the king's bed, and breaks down in tears, accusing Nibur of having fun while he was working tirelessly. Nibur, utterly annoyed, threatens Brody with jail time to make him leave. Once they're alone, Nibur puts on his robe and smirks, telling Amyitis she served him well last night. He then playfully points a finger at her, calling it well done. He smugly reminds her that she's the one who told him this was a gesture of praise in her homeland. Amyitis bursts into tears of humiliation, but a small part of her finds his teasing cute, a thought she quickly pushes away to focus on finding clues to go home. Outside, Brody is immediately swarmed by his subordinates, happy to have him back. He immediately begins gossiping about the king and Princess Amyitis, only to be kicked by Nibur, who coldly asks if he'd prefer a death penalty in Babel Tower for his gossip. Brody shamelessly pivots, asking why Nibur came out so soon and teasing him about his performance, earning a furious threat from the king to have his tongue cut off. A guard then whispers that Princess Amyitis is heading to the temple, and Nibur's interest is piqued, wondering what she's up to now. He confidently dismisses any concern about her meeting the handsome high priest, declaring Shamshi is his. Amyitis enters the spectacular temple library, remembering she time-traveled because of an ancient necklace and hoping the ancient slates hold a spell to send her back. As she struggles with a heavy slate, a hand covers her mouth from behind and she sees it's Prince Gale. She nearly brains him with the slate, but he quickly apologizes for his previous attempt to kill his brother. Suddenly, he notices the library door is open and pulls her into hiding just as a cleric enters. They hide behind a bookshelf as the cleric notes a document is out of place before leaving, allowing them to breathe a sigh of relief. Amyitis questions why a prince would be afraid of being caught in a library, and he explains that even nobles aren't allowed in without the high priest's permission. Now acting friendly, Gale offers to help her find a book. Flustered, Amyitis says she's curious about the High Priest of Babylon, wanting to know more about the man who saved her with his unique magic. As Gale begins to explain that Shamshi is nothing special, a former slave with inferior blood, Shamshi himself appears in the doorway, having heard everything. His mind flashes back to a painful past, being bullied and beaten by other disciples who called him a dirty slave chosen only to serve them. And a cold self-mockery fills his eyes. But before he can react, Amyitis passionately defends him, asking so what? She declares that Shamshi's slave origins only prove his strength and bravery, and that she despises people who look down on others. Gale is enraged by her impertinence while Shamshi confronts him. The prince makes a weak excuse about seeing the princess and saying hello, but Shamshi informs him that Chancellor Brody is looking for him regarding the assassin, sending the prince scrambling away. Amyitis breathes a sigh of relief, thanking Shamshi for the save. He coldly tells her she shouldn't sneak around, but she just smiles, retorting that she only dares to sneak in because he's the manager of the library. Unseen, Anita watches them from a distance, wondering if the high priest and the princess are secretly dating. Surrounded by ancient records in the temple library, Amides reaches for a high slate, thinking how inconvenient it is without a stool. Suddenly, a hand catches the falling slate just as a man steadies her from behind. Before she can react, a priestess named Anita offers her a stool, her smile hiding a cunning thought. If the princess gets closer to this handsome man, Shamshi, the king, might just abandon her. Using the stool, Amity stretches once more, but her footing is unstable. She slips with a cry, tumbling backwards into a powerful embrace as Shamshi catches her again. He apologizes for startling her as they share an intimate moment, their faces mere inches apart. The tender atmosphere shatters when a cold voice cuts through the air, asking what they are doing. It's Nibor, his eyes burning with fury as he takes in the scene. Amity's is overcome with a sudden sharp guilt, feeling as if she's been caught cheating. Without a word, Nibor grabs her arm, his grip like iron, and drags her from the temple. She cries out that he's hurting her, but he ignores her pleas, pulling her into a secluded garden. He confronts her viciously, asking if she came to the temple specifically to find Shamshi. He sneers that the princess must want to try new things with a new man, reminding her that priests are forbidden from such affairs, and that she belongs to him. Outraged by the insult, Amity's rips her arm away, declaring that she is not that kind of person and belongs to no one. In a flash of raw possession, Nibor pulls her back into his arms and bites her shoulder. A sharp sting that makes her gasp in shock. He smirks with satisfaction, telling her he just wanted to leave his mark and that every inch of Babylon, including her, is his property. Their intense confrontation is interrupted by Brody, who was caught peeking from behind a column. Feigning innocence, he announces that the delegations from all countries have arrived to be summoned. Among them is a representative from Sidon, who secretly vows to use Shamshi's assistance to make Nibor pay for waging war on his land. Nibor's eyes narrow as he identifies them as the Phoenicians. In one fluid motion, he unsheathes the Sidon representative's sword and presses the cold steel against his throat. Commenting on how pathetically weak he is, he then casually hands the sword back, telling him to stay alert or he'll be dead in a minute. Ignoring Nibor's call to meet the envoys, Amity's rushes back to the library, her mind racing. She inspects the stool and finds it smeared with oil, realizing her fall was no accident and that Anita must have orchestrated the entire scene. Just then, Brody appears, telling her Nibor was mad she disappeared and drags her to the main hall. He points out the lavish gifts from other nations, including a lineup of beautiful women offered as tribute. A bitter pang of jealousy hits Amity's, which Brody immediately teases her about. She vehemently denies it, her heart thumping as she questions her own feelings. Could she really be jealous over her nominal husband? A new princess from the Jewish kingdom, Ivy, presents herself to Nibor, openly fawning over his handsome features. Nibor smirks, clearly enjoying the attention, and calls Amity's forward. As whispers ripple through the crowd about the princess who is supposed to unite two kingdoms, Nibor pulls Amity's close. He asks if she wants the Jewish princess to serve him, his voice a low threat, warning that she'll be punished if she claims not to care. Realizing he loves seeing her jealous, Amity's plays along, declaring that of course she cares because he is her future husband. A look of genuine surprise flashes across Nibor's face before he pulls her onto his lap, pleased with her answer. Later, returning to her bedroom exhausted, Amity's finds Princess Ivy already there, berating a servant and mocking a bronze cup. Amity's calmly informs her that the shabby cup is a Phoenician antique known to cause heavy metal poisoning, causing Ivy to spit out her drink in horror. Ivy drops her facade, calling Amity's a mediocre, poor woman who should give up and marry someone else. Amity's, unintimidated, coolly agrees to quit the game for the price of 50,000 gold coins, an amount that leaves Ivy speechless with rage. Livid, Ivy lunges forward to slap her, but Amity's catches her wrist with ease, warning her rival that she's stronger and hurting her would be a grave mistake. Ivy storms off, vowing revenge. The entire spectacle was watched by a delighted Brody, who finds two women fighting over a man to be the ultimate entertainment. He approaches Amity's, offering a scroll he claims is a clue about her necklace, but only in exchange for something of value. Amity's, prepared for this, hands him a design sketch for a hot air balloon. Brody is utterly captivated by the idea and rushes off to build it, tossing her the scroll he bought from the black market and warning her to keep it secret. Amity's unrolls it, her face flushing bright red. It's not a clue at all, but a shockingly explicit portrait of Nibor bathing. Just as she's reeling, she hears his voice call her name from the doorway, her heart sinking with dread. Nibor catches Wendy staring and demands to know what she's looking at. Flustered, she quickly denies it's anything, trying to hide the rolled-up sketch behind her back as he beckons her closer. Her mind is a whirlwind of distracting images of him undressed, and in her panic state, her hand slips, accidentally tearing his garment. She apologizes profusely, but in the chaos, the sketch tumbles from her grasp and unrolls at their feet. His eyes narrow as he sees the drawing, realizing it's the source of her distraction. A smirk plays on his lips as he leans in, teasing her for being so obsessed with his body that she'd resort to tearing his clothes just to see it. He coldly tells her she'll have to wait in line if she wants him. Just as a group of adoring women barge in, ordered by the king to get the clumsy ameitis out of his sight, they unceremoniously toss her out of the room, slamming the door in her face. Hearing their laughter from inside, Wendy crumbles, realizing the devoted king she read about in textbooks was a complete lie. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, the high priest Shamshi is presented with a unique honey from Sidon as an offering to the goddess Ishtar. A woman kneels before him, asking him to taste it first. As he takes a spoonful, an envoy from Sidon appears and Shamshi's vigilance spikes. He questions why envoys are in the temple so late at night. The envoy smugly explains that King Nibur is too busy indulging himself with women to notice, and he tries to recruit Shamshi, promising to make Sidon a powerful nation. Shamshi flatly refuses, declaring he has no intention of betraying Babylon and will turn them in as rebels. But as the woman touches him, a sharp sting spreads through his body. The honey was poisoned, a special gift just for him, ensuring that if he won't work for Sidon, he won't work for anyone. Back outside the king's chambers, Wendy huddles on the cold floor, muttering curses at the jerk inside, until Nibur finds her asleep and lifts her into his arms, chiding her for being a dummy who will catch a cold. She stirs awake, confused and blushing to find herself being carried by him. The moment her eyes open, he drops her unceremoniously on the floor, claiming he was about to take her to his bedroom for some fun, but she woke up. As she calls him a pervert, he reveals the real reason he sought her out. The hot air balloon from her sketch is finally built. Their moment is shattered when a guard rushes in with urgent news. The high priest Shamshi is missing. An investigation reveals the Sidon envoys vanished overnight, presumably taking Shamshi with them. As Brody panics about sending troops, Nibur remains eerily calm, stating that one Sidonian remains. A guard then drags in one of the women from earlier, who defiantly calls Nibur a tyrant and spits that his sexual incompetence is why Babylon will fall. Brody is horrified, but Wendy can't help but stifle a laugh, realizing Nibur hadn't slept with any of them after all. Annoyed by her amusement, Nibur tells the captured woman that while he has no need for her, his guards do, and orders her sent to the military camp. Terrified, she cracks, confessing that the chariot carrying Shamshi is about to leave Babylon. A soldier confirms it's too late to intercept them with their own forces. But Wendy sees her chance, declaring she knows how to catch them before showing off the finished hot air balloon. As she climbs aboard, a guard warns Nibur not to trust a plot by Princess Ameitis, but the king simply orders Wendy to come down, refusing to let a woman handle it. In her haste to argue, she slips and falls directly into his arms. He coldly scolds her for being too clumsy to even climb a ladder. But as his back is turned, she scrambles back into the basket. Brody urges Nibur to let her try, questioning if he's stopping her because he's fallen in love with her. Before he can answer, Wendy takes off, shouting for him to wait for her good news. Watching her fly away, Nibur's resolve breaks. He declares he'll drive a chariot himself. Brody tries to stop him, reminding him that Wendy is a princess from Medes and not worth risking his life for. But Nibur shoves him aside, his eyes blazing as he states that she is his woman and he won't let anything happen to her, leaving Brody utterly shocked and questioning everything he thought he knew about Wendy's identity. Shamshi's eyes flutter open to a world of disorientation, his mind struggling to grasp where he is. A woman's voice cuts through the haze, informing him that the anesthetic has worn off, sarcastically praising him as the best helper for the Babylonian king. A surge of panic hits him as he tries to summon his sacred magic, the Blade of Light, only for the power to flicker and die in his hand. A pathetic glimmer of what it once was. The Sidonian woman smirks, revealing the poison coursing through his veins will not only break his magic but slowly drain his strength, propositioning him to serve her instead. Rage flares in his chest as he declares his identity as the distinguished high priest of Babylon. But his pride is met with a sharp, stinging slap across the face. The woman mocks him, spitting that he'd be nothing more than a slave's plaything without his predecessor. Humiliation washes over Shamshi. He feels tainted, unworthy of serving his goddess Ishtar any longer. Just as despair sets in, a gentle voice calls his name, and a radiant blonde woman descends from a massive balloon, her face lit with relief at having found him. As she leaps down gracefully, while the sight of the giant balloon sends the people on the ground into a panic, fearing it's some kind of monster. The woman Wendy quickly grabs his arm, urging him to escape before they're discovered. With pursuers closing in, she shoves him into a haystack for cover, promising to create a distraction. She misdirects the guards, pointing them in the opposite direction and buying precious time. Believing they're safe, she peeks out from hiding, only to be cornered by a guard who threatens to slice off her arm if she doesn't reveal Shamshi's location. Before the blade can fall, a fist slams into the guard's face, sending him flying. It's Nibur, his eyes cold with fury as he stands protectively over Wendy, warning the man that he'll cut his throat if he dares to harm her. He then turns to Wendy, ordering her to take off her clothes, and she anxiously asks if he was cut on the back. Nibor is momentarily taken aback by her concern, a flicker of warmth in his cold gaze. He teases that he might show her the wound if she agrees to be his woman, but she insists, worried the blade was poisoned. He pulls up his tunic, revealing a perfectly unmarred back. His divine protection has already healed the wound completely. Internally, Nibor finds himself wishing for the first time that he could be injured, just to see that look of concern on her face again. They find Shamshi in the hay, and Wendy rushes to embrace him, confessing she had a nightmare about his death, a sight that ignites a fire of jealousy in Nibor's eyes. He violently yanks her away, ordering Shamshi never to touch her again. Shamshi calmly accepts the blame, telling the king he can punish him as he sees fit. Wendy intervenes, and Nibor relents, admitting he won't punish the priest, confirming her suspicion that he cares for Shamshi despite his harsh words. But their brief respite is cut short as a group of armed men surrounds them, gloating that they found the king wounded and alone. Nibor scoffs at their arrogance, pushes Wendy toward Shamshi for protection, and grabs a simple wooden staff, claiming it's all he needs. He becomes a blur of motion, dispatching the assassins with brutal efficiency. As his captain Valent finally arrives with reinforcements, Nibor chides him for being late and orders him to clean up the mess. Wendy reminds him of the custom of rewarding a victorious warrior with a kiss, but he dismisses it, certain she would refuse. To his absolute shock, she stops him and plants a gentle kiss on his cheek. The world dissolves into a dream where he pulls her close, whispering that now that she has kissed him, he will never let her go. Wendy jolts awake in her bed, her face flushed as she questions her own feelings for Nibor. Her thoughts are interrupted when a maid announces Shamshi is there to see her. He presents her with a golden badge, a thank you gift that grants her unrestricted access to the temple library. He murmurs that it's nothing compared to her, leaving her puzzled. Later, her friend marvels at the gift, teasing that she has even charmed the high priest. Before inviting her to a party at the grand affair, he presents her with a small, beautiful sculpture of a woman, telling her to give it to Nibor. Wendy's heart sinks, assuming it's a likeness of a woman Nibor loves. But her friend quickly explains it's a figurine of his late mother, the queen. He reveals the complicated history of how the queen left the palace after adopting Shamshi, and pushes Wendy to give Nibor the gift. Left alone, Wendy contemplates the tangled relationship between the king and his priest, just before another guest intentionally splashes a drink in her face. Without missing a beat, Wendy grabs her own goblet and returns the favor, dousing the smug woman and leaving her utterly speechless with shock. Livy furiously accuses Wendy of splashing her on purpose, but Wendy coolly retorts that Livy hurt her first. The confrontation escalates as Livy warns Ameitis not to push her luck, reminding her she's still single, while other ladies whisper that the king is just waiting for Meads to decline before abandoning her. The gossip continues, calling the princess pathetic until Chancellor Brody storms in and orders them to leave. He comforts Wendy, telling her to ignore the bullies and offering her a golden goblet of wine to soothe her nerves. She takes a hesitant sip, while Brody seethes, wishing he could punish the rude guests. But Wendy's mind is elsewhere, consumed by the thought that she doesn't even want to marry Nibor because she isn't the real Ameitis and must find a way to leave. Seizing the opportunity, another noble suggests that if she doesn't want to marry the king, she could marry someone else in their kingdom, promising her wealth and servants. Their conversation is cut short by the sudden arrival of the king himself, Nibor. Brody smirks, telling Nibor he knew a mention of Wendy would bring him here, earning a sharp command to shut up from the king. Nibor approaches Wendy, ignoring the flustered noble, and cups her face with a charming smile, declaring that the princess is so cute and funny that he will, of course, marry her. He proclaims she will be his wife, then promptly decides he dislikes the party and grabs her hand to leave. He leads her outside to a waiting camel, explaining his horse was tired. Wendy is momentarily distracted by the animal, but then fueled by wine and desperation, she tells Nibor they can't get married. She rambles that she isn't the real princess and needs to go home because there are no computers or Wi-Fi here. To her shock, Nibor calmly reveals he already knows she's not the princess of Meads. Drunk and emboldened, she leans against him, declaring she likes gentle people and that he's too fierce, so she won't marry him. He leans in close, teasingly asking if she means a gentle person like Shamshi, a name she'd mentioned in a dream. Deciding not to argue with her any further, he sweeps her up into his arms and carries her away. Later, Wendy awakens in a haze, finding Nibor sitting beside her. Her drunken mind decides it's time for revenge, and when he asks what she plans to do, she lunges forward and bites his shoulder. He merely smirks, asking if that was her revenge, and she declares that now they're even. He carries the passed out Wendy back to her chambers, where a handmaiden takes over. The next morning, Wendy wakes with no memory of what happened, but she suddenly recalls she has to give something to Nibor and rushes out. Meanwhile, Nibor stands before a portrait, lamenting that his family left him nothing but a sculpture, feeling abandoned until he remembers he found something interesting. Wendy peeks into his room, calling his name and offering him the small sculpture. She explains she heard it was a blessing from his mother, a sign that she always loved him. Overwhelmed with emotion, Nibor pulls her into a tight hug, and she finds herself comforting him in his moment of vulnerability. But their moment of peace is shattered by a terrible omen, as a statue in the palace garden begins to bleed from its eyes. Rumors spread like wildfire, blaming Princess Amiitis for the bad luck. The minister sees the chance to pressure Nibor, insisting the bleeding statue is a sign he must reconsider the marriage. He stands before them, coldly asking if they want him to send her back to Meads. The news reaches Livy, who wastes no time finding Wendy to gloat. She sneers that the king has cancelled the wedding and Wendy will soon be kicked out, even mockingly offering to set her up with her fat brother. Just as Livy is enjoying her victory, Nibor appears. Livy's heart pounds, assuming he's come to make the announcement public, but he walks straight past her without a single glance. He goes directly to Wendy, takes her hand, and simply says she is to come with him. He leads her to a magnificent new hot air balloon, asking her to share the ride with him. As they ascend, he confirms the rumors. He announced the cancellation of their wedding. Wendy tries to act nonchalant, reaching for the controls, but he stops her, asking why she's crying if she's truly okay with it. She tries to lie, claiming a thorn pricked her, but he gently takes her hand and kisses her fingers, whispering that the cancellation is only temporary. Looking into her tear-filled eyes, he makes a solemn promise to one day share his entire kingdom with her. Their intimate moment is violently interrupted by a loud boom as the balloon lurches in the sky. Before they can react, a guard calls up from below, urgently reporting that the ministers are gathering with an emergency at the throne. The court erupts with accusations as ministers declare Princess Amiitis an evil messenger from the underworld, demanding King Nibor test her with the true fire to prove her identity. Nibor's patience wears thin as he glares at them, but another high priest bursts in, proclaiming Babylon cannot harbor a devil. The king's icy stare silences the man, who shudders in fear. Just then, the high priest Shamshi steps forward to defend her, questioning how the king could be unharmed if she were truly a demon. The old priest scoffs, accusing Shamshi of being under her spell, but Amiitis herself appears, thanking Shamshi for his support. With unshakable confidence, she announces that she will prove her own innocence without needing to face a burning rack. She declares she must leave the palace to do so, much to Nibor's visible annoyance at being left behind. Sensing his foul mood, Amiitis playfully clings to his arm, reminding him he's her future husband and that it's much safer with him by her side. He reluctantly agrees, only for her to cheekily add that he can come along as her guard. She leads him to the site of the infamous weeping statue, recalling a passage from a book about a plant that secretes a red liquid. As she examines the statue's eyes, an assassin lunges at her with a sword, but she swiftly dodges the attack. The man, an envoy from the Jewish kingdom, sneers that he was sent to get her out of the picture, but Amiitis smirks, revealing she knew of his plan and never came alone. On cue, Nibor flies through the air, delivering a devastating kick that sends the attacker sprawling to the ground. Amiitis swoons at the cool display of power before Nibor declares they will take the captive back to silence the doubters. As she cheers, Nibor suddenly pulls her into a tight embrace, his voice low and serious as he warns her this is the last time she will ever use herself as bait. Back in the throne room, the bound envoy Napoli is thrown before the court, who recognize him with shock. Napoli cries out to a green-haired woman named Princess Livy for help, but Amiitis calmly exposes him as the source of the rumors, revealing he also wanted Livy to replace her as queen. Livy is horrified, internally cursing Napoli for his failure, before quickly feigning innocence and pleading that she only stayed in Babylon out of admiration for the king. Nibor is unmoved, coolly telling her she can prove her loyalty by serving as a slave. When a minister questions how the statue could have wept blood, Amiitis elegantly demonstrates by stabbing a piece of a specific plant stem, which bleeds a red fluid, explaining this was used for the statue's eyes. She then cheekily suggests postponing the wedding for a year if any doubts remain, privately relieved at the thought of delaying their wedding night. But Nibor stands abruptly, announcing he will grant her urgent request and marry her on this very day next year. He grabs her chin, leaving her flustered and wondering if she's made a terrible mistake. As punishment, Nibor sentences the entire Jewish mission to slavery. Amiitis intervenes, explaining to him that oppression will only breed rebellion and that it's wiser to send them home. Intrigued by her political insight, Nibor ponders her words before agreeing to her plan, his curiosity about her origins growing deeper. He takes her hand and they leave together, while a seething Princess Livy watches them go, vowing to make Amiitis pay for the humiliation. Amiitis turns back, baffled that Livy isn't grateful for being saved, but Livy only sneers that her revenge will come one day. Amiitis scoffs, ready for the challenge, just as Shamshi appears and whispers that he has found clues to the document she seeks. Meanwhile, in the dungeons, the captive Napali is visited by the treacherous Prince Gale. Gale expresses his disappointment in Napali's failure before callously silencing him forever with a blade to the throat, ordering him to die for him. News of the suicide reaches Nibur, who correctly suspects a spy is operating within Babylon's walls. A puzzle he tasks his brother to solve before leaving to commission jewelry for his queen. Elsewhere, Amyitis sneezes while following Shamshi through a temple. He leads her to a towering, spiraling staircase where ghostly apparitions materialize, furious at the presence of an outsider. Amyitis gasps in terror, but Shamshi calmly shields her, declaring her his wife to appease the spirits, which promptly vanish. He dismisses her questions, claiming it was just an excuse and that his heart belongs only to the goddess Ishtar before granting her one day to study the sacred slates. Determined, Amyitis vows to read them all in time. As the sun sets, Shamshi finds her asleep, surrounded by mountains of ancient tablets. He gently wakes her and she stretches, exhausted from the most intense studying of her life. At that very moment, King Nibur is being told how pleased Amyitis will be with the wedding jewelry he is designing, but his pleasant mood shatters. His eyes lock onto an unpleasant scene in the distance, Amyitis laughing and talking intimately with Shamshi in the garden. While sharing a pleasant moment with Shamsi, Wendy muses that the great queen must be an elegant woman, feeling a strange connection to Nibur in his absence. But her peace shatters when she spots Nibur himself watching them from the bushes, his expression cold and distant. He sees her smiling so freely with another man, a sight he never gets to witness, and turns away in disgust before she can say a word. An attendant rushes to explain, revealing that the king has been desperately trying to find a way to cheer her up, even learning how to make jewelry just for her. Later that night, Wendy finds Nibur sitting under the moonlight with his lion and confronts him, asking if postponing their wedding was all part of some grand plan. He coldly confirms it was a scheme to flirt with Shamsi for political gain, reducing her feelings to a mere tool in his game. The casual cruelty of his words ignites a fire in her, and in a flash of rage, she hurls the cakes she brought at him. His lion roars defensively, but Nibur silences it with a single quiet command, his eyes never leaving hers. Still fuming, Wendy storms off, deciding to enact petty revenge by painting his favorite carriage. But as she approaches, Prince Gale appears with a wicked grin, cracking a whip that sends the horses into a frenzy. The carriage bolts, dragging a terrified Wendy along with it as she screams for help. Out of nowhere, Nibur appears, yelling her name and reaching out his hand, promising to stop the cart if she just takes it. For a terrifying moment, it seems too late as the carriage plunges over a cliff. Wendy squeezes her eyes shut, bracing for death, only to find herself wrapped in Nibur's arms as he tells her he warned her to hold on. They hit the ground with a brutal impact, the world erupting in a splash of red, waking at the bottom of the ravine. Wendy is shocked to find herself alive, quickly realizing Nibur used his own body to shield her from the fall and is now grievously injured. He weakly opens his eyes, assuring her that his guardian force protects him. Before pulling her into an embrace, he explains his divine power heals faster with the warmth of another person's body. And in the quiet aftermath, they both apologize for their harsh words. Just as the tension breaks, Wendy's stomach rumbles and she stands to find food. But he grabs her arm, urging her to stay close in the dangerous fight. While she forages, Nibur investigates the horse and discovers a strange substance on its mouth, realizing it was drugged. His thoughts are cut short by her cry, and he rushes to her side, relieved to find she was only startled by a tiny winged creature. She excitedly shows him the cub of a divine beast, but his face darkens as he commands her to put it down. The cub suddenly bites her, and in that instant, a colossal griffin, its mother, appears before them. Nibur recognizes it as one of the miracles of Babylon, and instinctively draws his bow, but lowers it, fearing a stray shot would endanger Wendy. He steps forward, declaring his royal status and offering his own life in exchange for hers. As the great beast looms, the tiny cub in Wendy's arms lets out a defiant roar, declaring that it must protect its new master. The mother griffin seems to understand, and after a long moment, turns and flies away into the night. The immediate danger past, Nibur collapses in pain from a stick lodged in his back from the fall. He asks her to pull it out, but instead, Wendy wraps her arms around him, reminding him of his own words about needing warmth to heal. A genuine smile spreads across his face as he tells her to hug him tighter, and she's filled with a profound happiness, realizing that unlike before, he chose to save her. As she thanks the little griffin for its bravery, and Nibur explains that she is now the fourth person in Babylon to possess a miracle. Back at the palace, Priestess Anita is blocked by guards, her worry for the missing princess palpable. Shamsi intervenes, coldly stating his concern is for the king and the kingdom. But once alone, his composure crumbles as he questions his own heart, wondering if Princess Amyitis has become more important to him than his king. Chancellor Brody frantically calls for King Nibur, his body aching from a sleepless night of searching the woods. His men bring grim news, reporting that the king's tracks simply vanish at the edge of a massive cliff, implying both he and the princess have fallen to their doom. The thought sends a chill down Brody's spine. He questions if they should flee to another country now that their king is gone. But the high priest, Shamshi, scoffs at the idea, declaring that Nibor is protected by the gods and could not have died so easily, ordering the search to continue. Desperate, Brody rushes to see Shamshi himself. Inside a grand hall, he presses the priest for any update on Nibor and Wendy. Shamshi attempts to use his divine magic, but his staff shatters as he tries to locate Princess Amiitis, her presence completely shrouded in fog. Despite the failure, he assures a nervous Brody that he can feel they are both still alive. Just then, an attendant announces the annual sacrificial ceremony is ready, with missions from various nations waiting for the king to preside. The crowd grows restless, demanding to see their king, and Brody watches in alarm as agitators begin to stir up dissent. A delegate from Tyre smirks, seeing this as the perfect chance to turn Babylon's allies toward Egypt. Suddenly, a divine beast streaks across the sky, dropping a flaming torch that explodes on the ground. From the light emerges King Nibor on horseback, with Princess Amiitis seated before him. The king's eyes lock onto the delegate from Tyrus, coldly informing him there are no equal relations with Babylon, only submission, and suggesting he get lost. The crowd is awestruck by the stunning arrival, and an overjoyed Brody rushes forward to embrace his king, only to be comically pushed away. Amiitis greets a relieved Shamshi, explaining they were late because they encountered a miracle. Nibor proudly announces to the entire crowd that his queen, Amiitis, has tamed a divine beast, securing blessings for all of Babylon. The people erupt in cheers, their faith restored. Nibor quietly tells Amiitis she has brought their country good luck, and now no one will dare judge her again. The plan to sow discord has failed spectacularly, forcing the foreign agents to retreat in disgrace. Later, after the ceremony, Gale confronts Amiitis, questioning why she didn't tell him Nibor was the one who put her in danger. Amiitis calmly replies that she doesn't want Nibor to be sad. Gale's face twists into a sneer as he cruelly tells her she is just a political pawn being used to keep Medes at bay, venomously asking if she truly believes Nibor likes her. Before launching a magical attack, before the blast can hit her, Nibor appears, catching Gale's wrist and effortlessly dispersing the energy. He reassures a worried Amiitis that Gale's attacks are useless against him, his gaze turning to ice as he demands to know what Gale thought he was doing. Feigning innocence, Gale asks why Nibor isn't busy with political affairs, but the king reveals he suspected something and had his men bring forward the man Gale hired to drug the horse. Gale shoves his accomplice away, then smirks at his brother, admitting he's mad that Nibor has Amiitis because he feels she's unworthy of him. Nibor's voice is dangerously low as he reveals the full extent of the plot. Gale had sabotaged the carriage Nibor was meant to ride, a trap Amiitis accidentally fell into. With a cold finality, Nibor declares Gale intended to attack his queen and sentences him to the Babel Tower jail. As Gale is dragged away, he glares at Amiitis, snarling that his father wanted another on the throne but Nibor snatched it. Nibor is forced to reveal a dark truth from his past. Their father sent an assassin to kill him, but in that moment a miracle awakened within him and he killed the would-be murderer himself. He fears this revelation will make Amiitis see him as a monster, just like everyone else. But instead of fear, Amiitis orders her griffin to go bite Gale. She then tells Nibor she understands the cruel politics of royal life and knows he was just fighting to survive. As he turns to leave, she stops him, refusing to let him run away from Gale's lies. She wraps her arms around him from behind, insisting he is not the cruel person Gale described and begging him to trust her. For a moment, he softens, admitting his father thought him cruel and that he struggles to control his temper. But then he pulls away, coldly telling her to stay away from him before walking out, leaving her alone and heartbroken, wondering what horrors he truly endured. At Brody's residence, Wendy is desperate to know what happened to Nibor, but Brody hesitates, fearing he'd be jailed for revealing the king's secrets without permission. She furiously insists they must help Nibor find closure, but just then the high priest Shamshi appears, overriding Brody's concerns. Shamshi promises to give Wendy the answers she seeks, not with words but with his magic. He casts a spell, and a wave of drowsiness washes over Wendy as she collapses into his arms, fated to see the truth for herself. Her consciousness drifts, and she finds herself standing in the sun-drenched city of Babylon. There, she witnesses a heartbreaking scene. A young Nibor is brutally shoved to the ground by his own mother, who coldly tells him to stop following her and never call her mother again. The vision shifts, revealing the mother with Nibor's father, Nabopolassar, callously plotting the boy's demise. She confirms Nibor is her son, but declares he will be killed the moment he enters the city so their other son can take the throne. Wendy awakens in terror, screaming that assassins are coming for Nibor. Shamshi calmly reassures her that what she saw was long in the past, and that Niebuhr has already turned the tables to become the king of Babylon. Brody adds a grim warning, explaining that while Niebuhr no longer gets drunk, he can't let go of the past and will kill anyone who approaches him when his temper flares. But as he speaks, he realizes she's already gone. Wendy rushes through the golden halls of Babylon, finding Niebuhr alone. He tells her to stay away, calling himself a cruel king, but she embraces him without hesitation. She confesses that her heart ached for him after seeing his past, and that she now understands he was only protecting himself, realizing in that moment she has fallen for him. Touched by her compassion, Niebuhr asks if she can stay with him forever, whispering that he doesn't care who she is, he just wants her by his side. But their peace is shattered as the scene shifts to a military camp where a servant offers Niebuhr a drink. He takes a sip and immediately spits out a mouthful of blood, his eyes wide with shock. The searing pain is familiar, the same as when he was stabbed by an Egyptian dagger, and he knows the water was poisoned. He collapses, realizing it was a present from his dear brother, Gale. He jolts awake, no longer a king in Babylon, but a young man named Andre in a strange room. A concerned classmate asks if he's all right, but he stands confused, declaring that he is Niebuhr, king of Babylon. The sight of a high-speed train outside the window makes his head spin, the unfamiliar world making him feel sick. This is too real to be a dream, which can only mean one thing. A smile spreads across his face as he realizes he must be in Wendy's world, meaning she is here somewhere. Just then, a commotion erupts as a bully snatches Wendy's papers, mocking her for having a crush on Andre and wanting to attend the same university. Niebuhr in Andre's body reacts instantly, seizing the bully's arm with bone-crushing force. He leans in, his voice dripping with menace, informing the terrified boy that he was killing on battlefields at age 8 and could end his life without spilling a drop of blood. The other students recoil in fear. Wendy rushes to his side, thanking him for helping her, reminding him of a time he did the same when she was a child. Niebuhr recognizes the memory from his previous time in Andre's body, but as Wendy gets close, a disorienting sensation pulls him away. He's ripped back to Babylon to his own poisoned body, as panicked voices cry out that the king has been poisoned. Wendy receives the devastating news that Niebuhr was ambushed by spies and is now unconscious, her face paling with worry. Brody, certain of the culprit, leads her to the Babel Tower where Prince Gale is imprisoned. He confronts his brother, asking if he was behind the attack. Gale erupts in triumphant laughter, boasting that his plan worked perfectly. He reveals he used the missing Egyptian dagger to create an incurable poison, and with Niebuhr gone, he will become king and take Wendy for himself. Wendy defiantly tells him to dream on, but as he reaches for her, a protective ward zaps him, making him yelp in pain. Realizing Gale has no cure, Brody suggests they seek out Shamshi. The high priest appears at that very moment, holding a vial of medicine he prepared for the king. Wendy snatches the potion, declaring she will deliver it herself, brushing off concerns by saying she's tougher than she looks. Shamshi agrees, bestowing upon her a divine miracle for protection on her journey. 3 days into their harsh desert trek, Wendy's companion marvels at her resilience, noting she looks spoiled but is unbelievably strong. Their journey is violently interrupted when an assassin hurls a spear, screaming for them to die. Her guard, Valent, blocks the attack, but they are quickly surrounded. Before despair can set in, Wendy's tiny winged griffin attacks the men, chasing them off into the desert. In the aftermath, a hooded figure stands before her, and as he looks up, a blush creeps onto her face as she recognizes him. The man before Wendy bears a striking resemblance to someone she knows, Andre, but he introduces himself as Nico, a simple businessman. He offers his help, and she cautiously accepts, introducing herself as Wendy before explaining vaguely that she was being chased because she hadn't been home in years. Nico's companion, Valent, remains suspicious, but Nico boldly offers to take Wendy to Egypt and marry her, a proposal that leaves her cold despite his familiar face. Valent, however, erupts in alarm, realizing Nico is Egyptian and furiously accuses him of being a spy, leveling his sword at the man's throat. Nico calmly insists he's just a businessman conducting trade, and Wendy steps in to defend him, arguing that his nationality doesn't automatically make him an enemy. The tension shatters when Nico casually mentions he's already married, a revelation that stuns Wendy. She then explains her own urgent mission. She's delivering an antidote for her husband who is injured on the front line. Intrigued, Nico asks to inspect the medicine and delivers a devastating verdict. It's a decent remedy, but it can only alleviate the curse, not reverse it. The true antidote, he claims, is in Egypt. A wave of desperation crashes over Wendy as she begs him to take her there, her voice cracking as she explains it's for Niebuhr. Against Valent's protests, she makes her choice, her resolve hardening as she declares she would have taken the blow for Niebuhr herself. With a final goodbye, she leaves her guard behind and gallops into the desert with Nico, their destination the heavily fortified Egyptian border. As they observe the formidable defenses, Wendy has a brilliant idea. She summons her griffin, who quickly finds a weak point in the patrol. They sneak past the walls, but their stealth is short-lived as a guard spots them and sounds the alarm. An instant later, a spear hurtles towards Wendy, and time seems to freeze as she stares at her impending death. But Nico moves faster, shielding her with his own body as the weapon tears into his arm, splattering blood across his cloak. Annoyance flashes across his face as he declares he's tired of the charade, revealing his true identity to the stunned guards. An entire platoon led by General Huba rushes to the scene and drops to their knees, hailing him as their pharaoh. Wendy is dumbfounded. The businessman was the pharaoh of Egypt all along. Nico smirks, retorting that she also lied. She is Princess Amyitis of Babylonia, and now that he's used her to get back into his country, they can part ways. Furious, Wendy reminds him of her quest for the antidote, but he simply tells her the clues are in his palace, and she's welcome to come find them if she wants to save her husband. Swallowing her rage for Nibor's sake, she reluctantly follows. Later, under the moonlight, Nico leans in close, asking if he truly resembles the man she was thinking of, but Wendy shoves him away, spitting that her Andre is far better than him. Amused by her fire, Nico playfully bites her finger before ordering his guards to lock her up in the palace. Meanwhile, Nico's brother Nero rages on the throne, furious that the assassination attempt failed and roaring for more men to be sent to kill his sibling. His tirade is cut short when Nico himself strides into the throne room, coldly ordering the guards to drag the usurper away. Nero grovels for forgiveness, but Nico is merciless, berating him for his pathetic attempt to steal the throne and for recklessly attacking Babylon. As Nero is dragged away to be locked up, Nico turns his attention to General Huba, asking about the Babylonian princess. He smiles cruelly, deciding to let her have some fun in his palace. Noting the legendary Iset's chain she wears, a relic said to guide the pharaoh's true wife. Huba is shocked, but Nico has other plans for Wendy. His plans, however, are not the only ones in motion. Huba's daughter, Phyllis, fumes with jealousy and conspires with Nico's cousin, Penny, to make the foreign princess disappear. They throw Wendy into a dark prison cell and force-feed her a potent aphrodisiac, callously explaining that it will make her desire 4 men at once. As 3 leering prisoners approach her, terror grips Wendy. But a flicker of hope appears as her griffin squeezes through the window bars. Fueled by desperation and the potion's heat, she grabs a rock and smashes it over an assailant's head, knocking him unconscious. She stares at her hands in horror, wondering if she's a killer. Just as the prison door is kicked from its hinges, standing in the doorway is Nibor. He calmly praises her for taking one of them down, and she collapses into his arms, sobbing. He gently reassures her the man is alive but deserved far worse for his actions, awkwardly trying to comfort her before placing a soft kiss on her forehead. But the potion courses through her veins, and she loses control, pulling him into a passionate kiss. Stunned, Nibor pushes her away, confused by her actions, then immediately fills with remorse for his harshness. Determined to be the man she needs, he resolves to change. Seeing her feverish state, he realizes she's not herself and carries her to the palace pharmacy. As he frantically searches for an antidote and helps her drink it, Penny and another woman appear at the door, calling for Phyllis. The woman reassures a panicked Penny that with her father's status as a general, the pharaoh would never punish them over a mere foreign woman. In the gilded halls of the Egyptian palace, the wizard Vardy informs Pharaoh Nico that with the recovery of Iset's chain, a great prophecy is about to be fulfilled, offering to perform a divination on the spot. Nico grants his permission and Vardy begins the ritual, only for a blinding flash of light to erupt from the brazier, a sign that something has gone horribly wrong. Before he can process the failed omen, a panicked Princess Penny bursts into the throne room with terrible news for Nico. She breathlessly reports that a foreign woman, Wendy, insisted on visiting the prison and began mingling with the tall, strong inmates, leaving Penny too terrified to intervene. The name Wendy instantly sparks Nico's concern, and he resolves to see the situation for himself, striding past a desperate Vardy who tries to stop him. The wizard frantically reveals the true divination. Nico is destined to become infatuated with the woman who possesses Iset's chain. He warns the pharaoh to be careful when setting his love trap, but Nico merely scoffs, grabbing Vardy by the collar and dismissing the prophecy as nonsense, telling the wizard to practice his craft more seriously before leaving him behind. Arriving at the torchlit prison, Penny guides Nico forward, her heart seething with jealousy as she internally curses Wendy for being a shameless hussy, sure she is about to be caught in a filthy act. But what they find is not Wendy, but Penny's friend Phyllis locked in a passionate embrace with a male prisoner on the cold stone floor. Penny is dumbfounded, stammering that she could have sworn it was Wendy just moments ago. From a nearby cell, a calm voice calls out and Wendy appears, nonchalantly asking if they were looking for her. Penny's confusion instantly morphs into rage and she lunges forward, accusing Wendy of forcing Phyllis to take her place. But Wendy is a step ahead, grabbing Penny's arm and whispering that she knew all about the princess's little plan to catch her red-handed, deciding instead to put on a show for Penny's benefit. With a cold smile, Wendy shoves the princess backward, then immediately starts crying out, asking why Princess Penny would push her for no reason. Penny tries to deny it, but Nico's voice cuts through the air like a whip, silencing her. His eyes burn with disappointment as he declares he can't believe a princess would stoop so low. Wendy, playing the victim perfectly, explains that Penny was just trying to protect her friend and that a simple foreigner like her is no match for royalty, wishing only to be left alone. Nico is caught, his resolve wavering as he internally reminds himself he cannot let Wendy leave Egypt while she holds Iset's chain. He pulls her into his arms, but their moment is shattered when a masked man suddenly appears, grabbing Wendy's other arm and yanking her away. Nico furiously demands to know who the stranger is, but Wendy recognizes him immediately, whispering his name, Nibor. Acting as the pharaoh, Nico commands the man to unmask himself. Nibor complies, revealing a face that leaves Nico confused and suspicious. Wendy quickly concocts a lie, claiming she bought him at the slave market and questioning if she needs the pharaoh's permission for everything. Nico isn't convinced, his mind racing with the possibility that this is the king of Babylon himself in a clever disguise. The tense standoff is broken by a messenger who reports that the king of Babylon has miraculously woken and is now on the battlefield, forcing Nico to attend a war council. Stunned by the news, Nico tells Wendy he must go, leaving her in the prison with her mysterious slave. As he departs, Wendy lets out a sigh of relief, realizing how close they came to being discovered. Nibor, the king of Babylon in the flesh, turns to her, his playful demeanor gone as he jealously pinches her cheek, demanding to know why she was smiling at another man when she's his fiancée. Wendy warns him of his recklessness, but he only leans closer, asking if she's worried about him. Flustered, she pushes him away and demands to know who is impersonating him on the battlefield. Nibor just smiles, revealing there's only one person capable of such a feat. Far away, his loyal subordinate Valent uses face-changing magic to drop the disguise of the king. Valent's aide is shocked to learn the real reason the king went to Egypt was for Princess Amytis, prompting Valent to declare he must go find her himself. He is quickly reminded that Nibor, as her fiancé, has every right to be there, and his interference would only cause trouble. Back in Wendy's Egyptian quarters, she stumbles and falls right into Nibor's arms. He catches her and she teases him, asking if he's ready for her to take the lead. After a moment of shock, he realizes she's joking, and she laughs, saying she's just giving him a taste of his own medicine. Her playful mood fades as she thinks of the great lengths the proud king went to save her, and she anxiously asks about his curse. He admits the medicine helped but hasn't cured him, which makes Wendy determined to find the antidote with him. But Nibor cuts her off, his gaze intense as he asks if she truly believes he would risk everything just for an antidote, reminding her that she knows the real reason he came for her. Wendy pushes him back, her heart in turmoil as she reminds herself she has to return to her own world and that she's already fallen for someone else. Understanding her conflict, Nibor promises not to force her, offering her the respect and equality she desires, and declares his intention to stay with her in Egypt. Wendy is left stunned and speechless, her heart pounding in her chest. Later, a small winged creature alerts Nibor to the curse's return as strands of his hair turn gray, a secret he commands the creature to keep. Meanwhile, Princess Penny reports to her father, General Huba, confirming that all witnesses to Phyllis's disgrace have been executed. The general seethes with rage that Wendy is still alive, comforting his weeping wife while Penny smirks from the side, proud that she has successfully turned Phyllis's mother against Wendy and eagerly awaiting the inevitable retaliation. Wendy finds herself barred from the library, a sharp reminder that without permission from the Egyptian royal family, she is a prisoner in this gilded cage. Frustrated, her thoughts are interrupted by an irate maid demanding to know why she isn't in uniform before shoving a tray of fruit into her hands. The maid commands her to deliver it to the North Palace and vanishes before Wendy can even protest, leaving her baffled but with a new task in hand. Arriving at the desolate North Palace, she finds it eerily empty. Wondering who could have possibly ordered a delivery to a deserted building, she places the fruit down and leaves, the strangeness of the situation nagging at her. Later in the council chamber, she directly asks Nico for permission to move freely, but he denies her with a cryptic smile. He explains that the ministers and citizens would never approve, revealing his true motive. He wants to keep her as a pawn, a valuable asset because of the Iset's chain she possesses. Just as Wendy resigns herself to another political game, a frantic servant bursts in with terrible news. The relics of the former pharaoh have been stolen from the North Palace. Instantly, the very same maid who sent her there drops to her knees, tearfully accusing Wendy of the crime, claiming she saw her sneaking away with something in hand. Wendy scoffs at the blatant lie, retorting that it was the maid herself who sent her on the pointless errand. The plot thickens as Nico's ailing mother, Quentina, arrives with another noblewoman, Phyllis, who is Tia's mother. Without hesitation, Phyllis orders a search of Wendy's room. Wendy, seeing the trap laid bare, smirks and not only agrees but suggests they search the accuser's room as well. Phyllis leans in, whispering threats of a felony conviction and urging her to confess. But Wendy coolly questions her certainty before the search is even complete. The guards soon return, their search of Wendy's quarters turning up nothing. Instead, the stolen relics were discovered perfectly hidden in the accuser's room. Internally, Wendy celebrates her foresight, having sent her magical companion Griffin to move the planted evidence. Nico's justice is swift and cold. He sentences the maid to the pyramids for the felony theft. The disgraced maid pleads with Phyllis for help, admitting she was ordered to frame Wendy, but Phyllis callously feigns ignorance and has her dragged away. Nico adds that for smearing his family's name, she will also suffer exposure to the sun. The sudden drama is too much for Quintina, who collapses from the shock. As Nico rushes to his mother's side, Wendy observes her weak, pale state, and a plan begins to form in her mind. Later, as Tia offers the weakened Quintina a special tea, Wendy bursts in and snatches the cup away. She calmly declares that the tea contains an ingredient that would be lethal to someone with Quintina's condition. Tia explodes, accusing Wendy of slander, and even Nico is skeptical, telling her she has gone too far. But Wendy stands her ground, confidently proclaiming that she can heal his mother. Hesitant but desperate, Nico agrees, appointing her as his mother's personal doctor but warning that failure will result in severe punishment. Later, he reveals to his mother that he knew all along Tia was behind the plot to frame Wendy, and he vows that he will not let her family get away with their schemes. As Wendy contemplates recipes for Quintina's recovery, she is suddenly pulled into a dark room. She prepares to fight back against her assailant, only to be stopped by a familiar voice. It's Nibur. He catches her as she stumbles, teasing that she must have missed him. He explains he must leave the palace to meet with insurgents who oppose Nico, a mission he is undertaking for the pharaoh himself. Just as a maid is heard calling for Wendy, Nibur says a quick farewell, pulling her close to place a soft kiss on her forehead. He calls her his queen before vanishing into the shadows. Wendy emerges flustered, covering a mark on her neck and blaming it on bug bites when the maid questions her red face. Meanwhile, Nico pays a visit to General Huba, Tia's father. He presents him with a chest of treasure, calling it a reward for his family's service in caring for his mother. After Nico departs, the general's wife praises their success, but he strikes her across the face. He furiously reveals that Nico knew about their plot and the reward was a thinly veiled threat. Back in Quintina's chambers, Nico finds Wendy fast asleep by his mother's bedside. He stops a maid from waking her and gently scoops her into his arms, admiring how peaceful she looks. As he holds her, Wendy stirs, wrapping her arms around his neck and murmuring a single name in her sleep, Nibur. The warmth in Nico's eyes instantly freezes over. Nico holds a sleeping Wendy, questioning his mother's handmaiden about anything suspicious she might have seen, but the nervous woman denies everything. He muses that Wendy looks just like his mother and that she must truly love the king of Babylon, having called his name in her dream. Under the pale moonlight, he carries her through the palace yard, unaware of the jealous eyes watching from the shadows. Princess Penny seethes with rage, snapping a twig as she brands Wendy a shameless seductress. She declares her previous pawn useless and vows to find another way to dispose of her rival for good. The next morning, Wendy awakens with a yawn, confused about how she returned to her room. Just as her griffin chirps for food, Princess Penny enters, claiming to be preparing medicine for MS Quintina. The little griffin immediately senses danger, calling her a bad girl. Penny puts on a show of remorse, apologizing for her past behavior and explaining she just doesn't want anyone to take Nico from her. As a supposed peace offering, she invites Wendy to a grassland party and grants her permission to the North Library, an offer too tempting for Wendy to refuse. Wendy agrees, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes that this might be a trap. At the party, she nervously eyes the caged lions, commenting on how wild and starved they look. Penny simply laughs, hiding her sinister thoughts. She had already arranged for the beasts to be drugged into a berserk frenzy and for their cages to be secretly broken. Just as Penny prepares to slip away, Wendy grabs her arm, demanding to know why she's leaving her own party so soon. Suddenly, a ferocious roar shatters the air as a lion bursts from its cage, sending the party into chaos. As guests scream and flee, Wendy's griffin tells her it knows a safe place to hide. Meanwhile, a frantic messenger reaches Nico, informing him that the beasts have gone mad and that Wendy is trapped there. A cold dread washes over Nico. He cannot let anything happen to the owner of Iset's chain. He arrives to a grim scene, his guards having just taken down the last of the lions. A soldier reports they found a female body, likely Wendy's, being devoured by the animals. Nico's heart sinks, believing he was too late, a pawn sacrificed before her purpose was fulfilled. But then another scout rushes forward shouting that they found survivors, including Princess Penny and Wendy, hiding in some old relics. The news hits him like a physical blow. Wendy is still alive. The survivors excitedly recount how Wendy led them to safety, using fire to fend off the beasts and even calming some of them with her words. Nico approaches her, his gaze intense, and leans in to whisper that he now understands the King of Babylon's obsession with her, concluding she must possess some kind of magic. Back in her chambers, Nico presents her with fine medicines, but Wendy insists they go to the more seriously injured. He refuses, grabbing her hand and telling her she's too important to be hurt. He points out a bruise she hadn't noticed, gently applying an ointment while his mind races, thinking of the prophecy and his plan to make her fall in love with him. His counsel, General Huba, is less than pleased, storming in to suggest using Wendy as a bargaining chip. Nico furiously rejects the idea, revealing he's only treating her well because of a prophecy that promises him full control once she loves him. He coldly declares his intent to perform a rite to strip her of her title as the Babylonian king's wife and make her his own concubine. Unaware of this sinister plot, Wendy successfully petitions Quintina for access to all the palace libraries. Her victory is short-lived, however, as Nico gravely informs her that a wizard's divination found her to be surrounded by evil and has demanded her banishment. He reassures a shocked Wendy that he will protect her, explaining the only way to appease the wizard is through a purifying rite. Behind her back, he tells his mother that love is useless and he is merely using Wendy to defeat Nibor. In the library, Wendy makes a startling discovery, a scroll detailing Andre's heirloom, the time-traveling artifact known as Iset's chain. Hope ignites within her that this could be her key back to the modern world. Her research is interrupted when Nico whisks her away for a hunting trip against her will. The hunt is a farce where Nico torments her with snakes, leaving Wendy utterly exhausted by the end of the day. As she returns to her room, a familiar hand grabs her. It's Nibor. He embraces her fiercely, explaining he heard she was in danger and rushed back, terrified of losing her. Wendy panics, hearing Nico approach, and shoves Nibor into hiding just as the pharaoh enters with a gifted necklace. Once Nico leaves, Nibor emerges, his voice thick with fury as he demands to know why his own wife is hiding from another man. She pleads with him to be quiet, but he refuses to leave without a kiss. She relents, and after a brief, stolen moment, he promises to return for her, leaving her blushing and touching her forehead in disbelief. Wendy clutches the copied scroll, needing to return the original to the library, but her path is interrupted by a strange sight. Hiding behind a pillar is one of Nico's concubines, Viola, who seems to be spying on her. Wendy wastes no time confronting the woman, demanding to know why she's been following her all morning. Startled at being discovered, Viola begins panting and blushing, but before she can explain, she collapses. Wendy rushes to her side, her medical knowledge kicking in as she diagnoses heat stroke from the cold limbs and flushed face. Acting fast, she asks a nearby servant for the coolest place around, Viola's palace, and rips a piece of her own dress to wet for a compress. Soon after, Viola awakens in her own bed, dazed. Her servant explains that she passed out from heat stroke and that Miss Wendy saved her. Viola, now recovered, thanks Wendy profusely, remarking that she must be a great doctor. Wendy brushes it off, saying she just learned a few things from her school doctor, but her mind is elsewhere, noting how familiar Viola looks. She recalls seeing a portrait of Viola in Andre's house and wonders if they are somehow related. Viola, oblivious to Wendy's thoughts, gushes about how cute and lively she is, adding that Nico wants to perform a purifying rite for her. The words hit Wendy like a ton of bricks. She realizes it's not a purifying rite but a marriage ceremony. A cold resolve settles in her heart. She has to figure out a way to make Nico give up on this marriage no matter what. The day of the rite arrives and Nico stands before the crowd, callously informing an attendant that Wendy won't even be his secondary wife but merely a concubine. But when Wendy appears, dressed in magnificent Egyptian attire with golden wings, Nico is momentarily stunned by her beauty, admitting the style suits her well. Wendy's expression is pure ice. She tears a golden accessory from her arm, declaring that she is the Babylonian king's wife and will never be his concubine. She throws the precious item to the ground in an act of defiance that shocks the entire assembly. Nico's admiration instantly turns to fury. He points a finger at her, his voice dripping with venom, roaring that if she refuses to be his concubine, she will be a slave with the lowest possible status. As a first act of punishment, her sweet griffin is locked away in a cage. Visiting her pet, Wendy apologizes, blaming herself for its imprisonment, but her resolve doesn't waver. If this is the path she must take to make Nico surrender, then she will see it through. Her new life as a slave begins with the demeaning task of sweeping temple grounds. But her torment is only just beginning. A jealous woman approaches, sneering that the porch is too easy for her before shoving Wendy into a dark, foreboding building. The heavy doors slam shut, and Wendy realizes she's been locked inside the forbidden abandoned temple of the Egyptian palace. Undeterred, she decides to search the gloomy, dusty interior, noting it hasn't been inhabited in a long time. Suddenly, a stone statue above her begins to wobble and then comes crashing down. Just as she's about to be crushed, a young man swoops in, catching her in his arms. She's startled when he calls her Highness, and he introduces himself as Zai Shah, a spy sent by Mr. Nibur to protect her. Relief wars with anxiety as she begs him not to tell Nibur about her situation, not wanting to worry him. Zai Shah looks conflicted, revealing the grim truth. Nibur isn't just busy, his body is succumbing to a powerful curse, and the high priest's medicine has failed. Wendy is horrified. He seemed fine the last time she saw him. Zai Shah explains that Nibur has been hiding the erosion of the curse from her every time they met. A sudden clatter from a nearby doorway puts them on high alert. A gaunt, white-haired man stumbles out, pleading for help and insisting he's a human, not a ghost. He clutches a mud board, explaining it contains the method to change him back, but he can't understand it. As he reaches for Wendy, his body suddenly shatters into countless stone fragments, leaving them stunned. Wendy observes that his symptoms were eerily similar to the king's curse, realizing the mud board is the key. She tells Zai Shah to take care of Nibur while she investigates, brushing off his protests that he was sent to protect her by insisting she can handle herself. Clutching the mud board, she feels a surge of hope. If she can decipher this, she can save Nibur. But her hope is short-lived as the woman who locked her in returns, demanding to know what's in her hand. Calling the artifact a book, the woman confiscates Wendy's entry permit and orders her guards to take the mud board. Wendy clings to it desperately, screaming that she'll never give it back, as it's the only clue to Nibur's remedy. The guards show no mercy, beating her with wooden sticks. She collapses to the floor under the brutal assault, but her grip on the board remains unbreakable, her last conscious thought a vow to save Nibur before her world goes black. Wendy awakens to find herself in a comfortable bed, her body soaring with a strange lightness. Zai Shah is by her side, weeping with relief that she's finally awake, confessing he thought she was dead and that Mr. Nibur would kill him. Looking around, Wendy recognizes the bedroom as Viola's. The concubine herself soon appears, explaining she found Wendy unconscious and brought her here to recover. Viola thanks Wendy again for saving her earlier and confesses she finds Wendy's reckless defiance at the ceremony incredibly masculine and attractive. As Zai Shah prepares to leave and report to Nibur, Wendy frantically stops him. She begs him not to reveal she was beaten, asking him only to tell Nibur that she is fine and has found a clue to his curse. Later, she studies the mud board, deciphering a cryptic message about obtaining the water of forgiveness from God's watchdog. Viola enters, noticing Wendy is still studying the board late at night, and announces she's brought someone to see her. A tall, masked figure in a dark cloak steps into the room and Wendy's heart leaps. It's Nibur. Zai Shah follows him in, apologizing profusely for failing to follow her orders, explaining Nibur kicked his butt to get here. Viola wisely ushers Zai Shah out, leaving the two alone to talk. Wendy softly tells Nibur he can take off his mask now that they are alone. He resists, but she insists, needing to see his face. He finally removes the mask and the sight shocks her. His hair is now silver, his eyes mismatched. The curse is advancing and he can no longer suppress its effects. He tells her he can't let her stay here and suffer any longer and orders her to come back to Babylon. But Wendy refuses, insisting she hasn't found the cure yet. Seeing her stubbornness, Nibur's expression hardens. He declares he won't let the woman he loves be hurt continuously and that he'll use force if he has to. He sweeps her into his arms to carry her away, but she fights back, sinking her teeth into his shoulder. Through tears of desperation, she confesses that he doesn't understand anything. She loves him, and that is precisely why she has to stay until she finds the antidote to save him. Cornered by Nibur, Wendy finds herself unable to deny the words she just spoke. Instead of backing away, she throws her arms around him, a silent confession that she meant every word. Her mind flashes back to when she first arrived in this world, her only goal being to return to modern society, seeing him as nothing more than a tyrant. But now everything has changed, and she admits she loves him. He pulls her closer, his voice soft as he tells her he loves her too, Nibur. Wendy teases him, calling him silly and saying she knew he loved her, to which he cheekily replies that he's a quick catch. A blush creeps up her face as she calls him a narcissist, but her resolve melts as they lean in for a kiss, and she whispers that she loves him too. The tender moment shatters as Nibur suddenly pushes her away, gasping for breath as a sharp pain courses through him. With dawning horror, he realizes the curse is spreading again. He collapses into her arms, his strength failing him as he calls out her name before losing consciousness. Viola and her entourage burst in, demanding to know what happened to the princess. Their eyes fall on the unconscious Nibur, and one of them recoils in terror, calling him a white-haired cannibal ghost. Later, with Nibur resting, Viola reassures a worried Wendy that he just fainted from the pain. Viola then explains the grim legend of the cannibal ghosts, recalling that Zai Shah had mentioned them before. She speaks of ancient Egyptian tales where white-haired monsters brought bad luck by eating people, and how years ago, many went missing after such creatures emerged from a pyramid. The pyramid was sealed by the pharaoh's order, becoming a forbidden area, a strange reaction that only fuels Wendy's suspicion. A fire of determination ignites in Wendy's eyes. She declares she's going to that forbidden pyramid to uncover the truth. Viola reminds her that she's essentially a prisoner in the palace, but promises to find a way for her, telling Wendy to wait in her room. Wendy watches over Nibor's sleeping form, vowing to find an antidote as quickly as possible. That night, his condition worsens, the curse eroding him faster, forcing her to carefully feed him medicine. Hope arrives in the form of Viola, who announces that Mr. Nico will be leaving the palace in 2 days for a parade, giving Wendy the perfect opportunity to sneak out. Wendy's spirit soars as she sets her sights on her destination, the Forbidden Pyramid. In the days leading up to her dangerous mission, Wendy gets an easel delivered and decides to create a parting gift for Viola, a portrait painted in a modern style unlike the frescoes of Egypt. After telling Viola to stay still, she finishes the piece, a small token of her immense gratitude. Viola is stunned by the realistic portrait, calling Wendy a professional muralist, but Wendy humbly credits the technology of her era. Viola then looks at her with a hint of sadness, admitting she's jealous of the deep connection Wendy and Nibor share. She confesses her own marriage to Nico is purely political, she is nothing more than a tool. Before Wendy can comfort her, Viola abruptly changes the subject, claiming she has an idea to cheer Nico up and asks Wendy to follow her. Her grand idea is a heart-shaped egg rice dish, which they present to Nico. He immediately suspects Wendy's creative influence, and seeing her attempt to be nice through Viola, decides he might as well give her a chance. Later, by the pool, Wendy muses that Nico and Viola are destined to be together as the ancestors of Andre and Isette. Nico suddenly appears behind her, and as she stumbles, he catches her firmly. He coldly asks if she's tired of being a slave and wants to be his concubine. Playing along with his twisted game, Wendy agrees, declaring she's sick of being a slave and will become his concubine on one condition: he must return her griffin. A flicker of genuine surprise crosses Nico's face. He pulls her into an embrace, admitting to himself that hearing her agree makes him happier than he ever thought it would. On Ammon Memorial Day, Nico's procession leaves the palace grounds, and Wendy seizes her chance, her griffin on her shoulder as she announces it's time for the pyramid. She stands before the massive, forbidden structure Viola warned her about, and ventures into the dark, crumbling corridors. Her exploration is cut short when a stone statue of Anubis lurches to life. It shoves her against the wall, tearing her dress. Panic grips her as she realizes she's all alone with no one to save her. But despair quickly turns to resolve she has to save herself. Spotting a hard rock used by ancient miners, she grabs it and smashes it against the statue's legs, shattering the creature into pieces. She barely has a moment to breathe before she hears another sound. Ready for a fight, she raises her rock, yelling for the next one to bring it on. But a hand suddenly grabs her wrist. It's Nibor. Tears of relief stream down her face as she asks why he's there. He explains Viola told him of her plan, and he couldn't bear to let her go alone. She collapses into his embrace, utterly spent. Their reunion is interrupted by voices from deeper within the pyramid. They hide and watch as Nico and his advisor inspect a cell of white-haired men. Nico brutally stabs one of the prisoners with a dagger, and Nibor freezes, recognizing it as the very blade that cursed him. The advisor explains that the side effects of their immortality experiments are too strong for humans to handle. But Nico is consumed by his ambition, demanding to know why gods can live for millennia while humans cannot. Their griffin lets out a nervous chirp, exposing their hiding spot. They've been found. Nibor grabs Wendy and they run as the griffin leads them away. Suddenly, the floor cracks and gives way beneath them, plunging them into a dark, bottomless pit. A pink-haired woman stares in disbelief, having just been asked to reopen a bar and become the boss. The man before her explains that he can't be associated with the place publicly, making her the perfect front. She frantically refuses, suggesting the old manager, but he dismisses the idea as cruel. She wavers, arguing it's inappropriate for a teacher to own a bar, but he reminds her that he did the same thing before delivering the final, crushing question: has her family's debt been paid off? She freezes, the question hitting her like a physical blow. The answer is a painful no. Flashes of her past self working tirelessly through university just to survive surface in her mind, the immense weight of her debt an inescapable stone chained to her ankle. Nibor wakes Wendy in the cavernous darkness, explaining they survived the fall but are now trapped in an underground maze. They must find a new way out. Suddenly, a sharp pain rips through Nibor's body as the curse erodes him from within. He grits his teeth, realizing he's on the verge of breaking down and can't drag Wendy down with him. When Wendy calls out that she's found another path, he shoves her away, his voice cold and distant. He orders her to leave, cruelly stating he no longer wants to be with her and that she must regret coming to Egypt to protect him. His mind screams that he cannot be her burden. But Wendy sees right through the painful act. She grabs him, refusing to let go, her eyes filled with defiance. She challenges him, asking if he truly has the strength to push her away and if he plans to simply die alone. With newfound resolve, she seizes his hand and pulls him along, declaring she will drag him out of here if she must. As they venture deeper, a thick miasma begins to fill the air, making them both cough and choke. A terrifying inscription on the wall warns that all intruders will die. The world spins as they both feel dizzy, collapsing into the toxic fumes. Wendy's consciousness fades, only to awaken in a lavish bedroom, utterly bewildered. A strange man, Andre, greets her warmly, informing her that it's their engagement day. The news shocks her. She has no memory of any engagement. Despite her confusion, she follows him to see his collection, a lingering feeling that she's forgotten something important nagging at her. He shows her an ancient pharaoh's robe, mentioning the name Nebuchadnezzar II. The name is a key unlocking a flood of memories: Nibor, the maze, the miasma. When Andre tries to lead her to the ceremony, she pulls away, her heart now certain. She tells him that while she once admired him, she has found her true love, Nibor. Realizing she's trapped in an illusion, she resolves to escape, and the pristine world around her begins to crumble and collapse. She's suddenly back in the dark, dusty tomb, frantically searching for Nibor. She finds him lying unconscious on the cold stone floor. Her small companion, Griffin, confirms that he's trapped in his own illusion and will be lost forever if he doesn't wake soon. Desperate, Wendy throws her arms around him, confessing that she's the fake Ameitis and that she loves him, begging him to come back to her. She pours all her feelings into a single, desperate kiss. The magic works. Nibor's eyes flutter open. As she helps him sit up, he cheekily grabs her hand, a playful smirk on his face as he asks her to do it again. He pulls her into another passionate kiss that leaves her breathless. She can't help but notice he seems far too energetic for a dying man. She asks what his illusion was about, and he admits he dreamt of marrying someone. His dream was a frustrating one, where an illusion of Wendy as Ameitis refused to believe she was his wife, telling him to go be with the real Wendy instead. Nibor casually mentions to the real Wendy that it's a pity he had to leave the illusion before spending a wonderful night with the beauty inside, which earns him a shocked glare. He quickly laughs it off as a joke. Just as the entire cavern begins to rumble and shake violently, they find themselves in a vast hall covered in frescoes of Egyptian mythology. As Wendy identifies the gods, a massive axe-wielding statue with glowing red eyes comes to life. With a terrifying swish, it swings its weapon down. Nibor yanks Wendy to safety just as the axe obliterates the spot where she stood. The guardian growls that their offense is unforgivable, sentencing them to an eternal sleep. A divine sword materializes on a nearby altar. Scoffing at the arrogant Egyptian god, Nibor grabs the weapon, ignoring Wendy's worries about his condition. He leans in close and whispers that a Babylonian fighter will always protect their lover until death. He then launches himself at the guardian, a blur of silver hair and flashing steel, dodging its massive swings with incredible agility. With a powerful strike, he slams his sword into the ground, shattering the stone beneath them. He lands safely, assuring Wendy he's unharmed. But she sees a glowing object amidst the statue's rubble. Realizing it could be the legendary water of forgiveness to cure his curse, she dashes forward and retrieves a small bottle. She urges him to drink it, and he does so without a second thought, his trust in her absolute. The moment the bottle is empty, the entire place begins to fall apart. Following Griffin, they race through the crumbling passages and burst out into the sunlight. Wendy turns to Nibor, her face beaming with relief, only to watch in horror as cracks spread across his skin and his body begins to disintegrate before her very eyes. The scene jarringly cuts to a modern home, where a woman with red hair affectionately sees her partner off to work, planting a kiss on his cheek as he sits in a wheelchair. Once she's gone, his gentle expression hardens into a cold mask as he summons his subordinate Nalan. Racked with guilt, Wendy cries out that she put her master in danger and made him suffer this fate. But a rustle from a nearby cloak startles her and a small voice calls her name. A little boy with dark hair and purple eyes points at her and she stares in disbelief, a single name on her lips: Nibor. Overwhelmed with joy, she realizes he's alive and pulls him into a desperate hug, sobbing with relief. But the reunion is cut short as Nibor, weakened, collapses in her arms, barely able to say he's fine. Wendy quickly deduces that the water of forgiveness must have saved him, but came with the terrible side effect of regressing him into a child. Determined to find a cure, she scoops him up and heads back toward the Egyptian palace. Inside, Nibor is burning with a fever, sweating and unconscious. As Wendy tries to cool his face with a damp cloth, he weakly bats her hand away. He suddenly wakes up, complaining of the heat and demanding to know where the pool is. He tries to leap out of bed but immediately face plants onto the floor, his new, tiny body completely betraying him. He curses in humiliation, disgraced that a ruler like him could be so clumsy. Wendy offers to help him with a bath, but he furiously rejects her, shouting that he doesn't need her help and being held like a child is a humiliation. Wendy finds his prideful tantrum utterly endearing, realizing she now has a rare chance to treat him this way, and joyfully lifts him into her arms. She watches him in the pool with a delighted smile, savoring the moment. Nibor, submerged to his chin, glares at her and asks why she's so happy, warning her that even in this smaller form, he can still deal with her. With a sudden yank, he pulls her into the water with him. He traps her against the wall, his face inches from hers, reminding her that he is the king of Babylon no matter his size, and she is destined to be his queen. Just as the tension rises, they're interrupted by a voice from the doorway. It's Nico. An order had been given to find Wendy and stop her before she could leave Egypt. And Nico has found her right here. He asks if she's leaving, and she nervously suggests they talk after she gets out of the water. Nibor clutches her protectively, his eyes filled with hostility. Nico coldly agrees to wait outside. Later, Wendy confronts him and he immediately drops the pretense, revealing he knows she went to the pyramid. He presents her own bracelet, which he found near a pit, and coldly informs her that Viola's maid told him everything, including the fact that the king of Babylon is hiding in the palace. He accuses her of lying about becoming his concubine, and Wendy's blood runs cold as she realizes he must have tortured the maid for the truth. At that moment, Nibor emerges from behind a curtain, calling her name. Nico stares, finding the boy strangely familiar but unable to place him. Thinking fast, Wendy throws her arms around Nibor, claiming she saved him from the pyramid and warning Nico that she won't let him hurt the boy, knowing he uses humans for his eternity experiments. Nico is called away by a guard and leaves for the time being. Wendy immediately turns on Nibor, scolding him for coming out, but he scoffs that there's no way he would hide in a woman's bathroom. In response, she smacks him on the head, telling the brat to stop talking like an adult. Deciding to find out what Nico is up to, she sneaks out to eavesdrop. She overhears a guard reporting that a search of the palace and capital has yielded no trace of the king of Babylon. Nico muses aloud, wondering if the king could have truly abandoned his queen. Then he calls her out, knowing she was listening the whole time. He hands her the falsified report, smugly telling her that the king of Babylon has abandoned her and fled the country. Wendy, realizing this is her chance, plays along perfectly, her face a mask of heartbreak as she curses Nibor for being a bastard. Nico, inwardly praising her acting skills, wipes a tear from her cheek and tells her not to cry for someone so unworthy. He seizes his chance, asking her to stay in Egypt and lead him to eternity as the owner of Iset's chain. Suddenly, Nibor runs up to them, calling Wendy his sister and acting like a frightened child. Wendy can barely contain her cringing at his over-the-top performance. Seeing her devotion to the boy, Nico relents, promising not to kill him and telling her to think about his offer before leaving. The moment he's gone, Nibor drops the act, telling Wendy it's never going to happen, but she quickly shushes him. He realizes how dangerous the situation is. With his small body, he has to get Wendy out of Egypt before the pharaoh pesters her further. Later in the bedroom, she tells him it's time for bed. He leans in close, reminding her that even if his body has shrunk, she shouldn't forget he's her husband. But his attempt at intimidation backfires spectacularly. Wendy finds him utterly adorable and pulls him into a crushing hug. He struggles against her affection, completely bewildered by her talk of internet fans, and shouting that this is only temporary. She just pats his head, agreeing with a smile before her expression turns serious, resolving to find out where Nico has locked up Viola. The next day, Viola is freed. She tearfully explains to Wendy that while she wasn't tortured, her maid was threatened into revealing everything. But when she asks where Lord Nibor is, Wendy freezes. At that exact moment, a group of maids discovers the child Nibor, squealing over how cute he is and pinching his cheeks. Wendy and Viola can't help but chuckle at his newfound popularity. Wendy quickly lies, telling Viola the boy is named Nick and she found him in the pyramid. Meanwhile, Nico sits on his throne as his advisor reminds him that with the king of Babylon gone, this is the perfect time to win Wendy's heart. The advisor passionately pleads with him not to let the pharaoh's dream of eternity turn to dust because of a single woman. Nico's eyes harden with renewed determination. He agrees that nothing can compare to eternity, and a woman is certainly not worth giving it up. Within the opulent Egyptian palace, a servant presents Wendy with lavish gifts from His Majesty, causing her to gasp at their beauty. Nibor, however, scoffs at the display, warning her not to be swayed by some cheap clothes. Just then, the pharaoh Nico appears, pleased to see Wendy admiring his presents, boasting that they are made by the finest dressmakers and that she can have anything she desires. He reminds her of the luxurious life he promised, a stark contrast to her past struggles. Suddenly, Nibor interrupts, grabbing a piece of fabric and questioning its quality. He bluntly states that he's seen similar, unimpressive clothes at Viola's place before. A flicker of annoyance crosses Nico's face as he admits to sending Viola similar items but quickly pivots, ordering his servants to bring out unique, priceless gems to truly impress her. Wendy is thrilled at the chance to see real Egyptian jewelry, but her excitement is short-lived as Nibor inspects a gem and declares it to be full of flaws. Mortified, Wendy clamps a hand over his mouth while Nico dismisses the boy's words as total nonsense from someone who knows nothing. Later, as they wander through the bustling Egyptian market, Wendy questions why Nibur insists on shopping there. He retorts that Nico is just trying to buy her affection with gifts and that he has far better things in his own country. Wendy teases him, pointing out that back in Babylon, he never gave her any gifts, only threw her in prison. Embarrassed and angry, Nibur storms off, muttering that he had his reasons, leaving Wendy to ponder how his recklessness might expose his true identity to the suspicious pharaoh. In that moment of distraction, a shadowy figure lunges from the crowd, silencing her screams as he drags her into the darkness. Wendy awakens with a splitting headache, her hands bound on the creaking deck of a pirate ship. The pirate leader, Itin, holds a dagger to her throat, sneering that he's captured the pharaoh's new favorite plaything. Just as Wendy tries to deny it, a familiar, treacherous voice cuts through the air. It's Penny, who smugly confirms to the pirates that Wendy is Nico's most precious treasure and the perfect bargaining chip. Wendy stares in disbelief, realizing she's been betrayed. Penny reveals her cruel plan to have the pirates sell Wendy off to a foreign land so she can return to Nico's side. As Wendy lunges forward, a pirate grabs her by the hair, yanking her back brutally. Her cry of pain is cut short by the sound of a mug shattering against the pirate's skull. Nibur appears, his eyes blazing with fury, roaring that he's coming for her. Despite his fierce entrance, the pirates quickly overpower his small frame, slamming him to the deck. Soon both he and Wendy are tied up together, defeated. Nibur curses his shrunken body for his weakness, but Wendy apologizes, blaming herself for getting him captured. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Nibur tells her he's the one who should be sorry for how he treated her in the past. Their brief truce is shattered when the pirates drag Nibur away. The leader explains their twisted game. Wendy must throw daggers at a target where Nibur is tied, and if she misses, he dies. Horrified, Wendy refuses, unable to risk his life. But Nibur's calm voice reaches her, filled with an unshakable confidence as he tells her to do it, because he trusts her completely. Stunned by his faith in her, she takes a steadying breath, and with a flick of her wrist, sends the daggers flying, each one striking its mark perfectly. She collapses in relief as the pirate leader, impressed by her skill, orders Nibur to be untied. Seizing the opportunity, Wendy appeals to the pirates, pointing to the scars on their hands and guessing correctly that they were slaves who escaped Nico's pyramid construction. The pirate captain, Itin, is stunned by her kindness, admitting she's the first noble to ever show him sympathy and agrees to let them go. But their freedom is cut short by a thunderous explosion that rips through the ship's hull. Nico stands on the deck, his expression ice-cold, and pulls Wendy into a protective embrace. He declares that every single person on the ship will be executed for daring to touch what belongs to him. He then turns to Wendy, ignoring her struggles, and promises to marry her when they return. Wendy shoves him away, furiously shouting that Penny planned the entire kidnapping and that she is Nibur's wife, not his. Unfazed, Nico's eyes darken as he orders his guards to seize Nibur. He leans in close, issuing a chilling ultimatum: marry him or watch Nibur be executed alongside the pirates. As the guards drag Nibur away, he gives Wendy a small, defiant smile, urging her not to give in to the threat. Thrown into a grim prison cell, Nibur smirks with cold determination, knowing Nico can never have Wendy as long as he lives. He calls out to the pirate leader, Itin, and proposes an alliance. Help him escape, and he will ensure they all get away from Egypt with Wendy in tow. Days later, a reluctant Wendy is escorted onto Nico's majestic ship. The pharaoh greets her, immediately asking why she isn't wearing the clothes he chose. She defiantly tells him she refuses to wear them, but he merely smiles, telling her he has a surprise. He guides her to the railing and points. Wendy's blood runs cold at the sight of Penny, beaten and tied to a post, left to die under the sun. Nico whispers that he's taken care of the problem and that she'll be jerky in a few days. A wave of terror washes over Wendy. The man beside her is a monster, and she knows with chilling certainty that if she doesn't escape, she'll suffer the same fate. Wendy, with a sly smile, lays her trap, telling Nico that if he truly wishes to marry her, he must abide by the customs of her homeland. But Nico is no fool. His eyes narrow with suspicion as he grabs her arm, demanding to know where she thinks she's going and reminding her they are on the Nile River. Thinking fast, Wendy tries to stall for any chance to escape him. But the moment is shattered by a sudden clank from below deck, and Nico's head snaps up, instantly sensing an intruder. The cabin door bursts open and a young, dark-haired figure named Nibur rushes in, calling Wendy's name in a panic. Nibur quickly explains they've escaped from prison, prompting Wendy to rush to their side, asking if they are all right. Nico scoffs at the incompetence of his guards before casually inviting the annoying kid to stay for the wedding. Nibur is having none of it, stepping protectively in front of Wendy and challenging Nico's right to force her into this marriage. Without another word, Nibur grabs her hand, announcing their departure, and in a breathtaking leap, pulls her over the side of the ship and into the churning water below. Enraged, Nico roars for his guards to stop them, but it's too late, they are already submerged. From the deck, an arrow slices through the air, and Nibor screams a warning to Wendy, twisting to take the projectile in their own shoulder with a cry of pain. The sight sends Nico into a fury. He snatches a bow from a guard and strikes the man, demanding to know who dared shoot without his permission. As the terrified guard begs for mercy, Nico stares out at the river, realizing with a grim finality that Wendy and the mysterious kid have disappeared beneath the waves. Underwater, Wendy holds onto the wounded Nibor, relieved she knows how to hold her breath from her school days. She promises to keep them safe, pointing towards the silhouette of Itten's ship, their only hope for salvation. Nibor, fighting against the searing pain, struggles to stay conscious. But the wound is too much, and they begin to sink, vowing to protect her with their last breaths. Wendy refuses to let go, grabbing their hand and pulling them close, her heart aching at their false bravado as she resolves not to leave them behind. Pulled aboard Itten's pirate vessels, Wendy frantically tends to the unconscious Nibor, her panic rising when the wound doesn't heal as she expected. She anxiously wonders if their healing powers have weakened along with their body. The pirate captain, Itten, instructs her to take Nibor to a cabin, promising to send a doctor. A crewmate bandages the deep wound, reassuring Wendy that with Nibor's strong constitution, they should recover in a month. When Nibor finally awakens, Wendy explains they are safe and have escaped Egypt. Just then, the ship is rocked by a violent tremor, and Wendy decides to investigate. Nibor insists on coming, but she gently pushes them back, telling them it's her turn to be the protector. A blush creeps across Nibor's face as they declare it is their duty to protect the one they love. On deck, a ferocious storm rages, tossing the ship like a tot. Itten orders his men to secure the sails, brushing off Wendy's offer to help by telling her to simply stay out of the way. But disaster strikes when a loose barrel careens across the deck, striking Wendy and sending her flying overboard. Nibor, having followed her, screams her name in pure terror. In a flash of brilliant light, Nibor's body transforms, growing into the form of a full-grown man. Without hesitation, he dives into the angry sea, catching her hand just as she's about to be swallowed by the waves. He pulls her into a desperate, tight embrace back on the deck, whispering that he almost lost her. The crew stares in awe at the miracle, witnessing a boy become a man before their very eyes. Nibor gently checks her over, explaining that he changed back because of his love for her. Later in the cabin, he leans in close, his voice low and intense, confessing that ever since he changed back, he's been wishing to kiss her. He then gently presses his lips to her forehead, leaving Wendy flustered and a bit disappointed. Her confusion turns to shock as he begins to unbuckle his belt, but her gaze catches a familiar scar on his shoulder. She demands to see it, questioning why it remains when he's supposed to have a god's protection. He calmly explains it's a childhood scar, a permanent medal signifying he protected the one he loves. He then pulls a golden emblem from his belt, and Wendy realizes with deep embarrassment that he was never undressing at all. Holding the emblem, Nibor swears an oath to his ancestors to love and protect her for eternity. Wendy tearfully admits she has nothing to give in return, but he silences her, whispering that her feelings are all he needs. He holds her close, confessing that while he has everything a king could desire, she is his only priceless treasure. Their tender moment is interrupted by Itten and his crew bursting in, begging the god and clergy for help. Itten explains that Nibor's transformation proves he is a god, and pleads with them to solve their dire freshwater crisis after the storm destroyed their supplies. Nibor is speechless, but Wendy, with a confident smile, announces that they will fix the problem, whispering to a bewildered Nibor to just wait and see. The pirates erupt in cheers, their faith in their newfound deities completely sealed. With unwavering focus, Wendy sketches a diagram for a simple water filter on a piece of parchment, handing the plans to a rugged pirate and explaining it as a gift from God. He returns half a day later with supplies but reports there's no glass, a luxury far beyond a pirate ship. A flicker of frustration crosses Wendy's face as she contemplates a replacement. But then a spark of inspiration hits her. They can use iron sheets, which are even better for distillation due to their heat transfer properties. The makeshift distiller is assembled, and soon a pirate watches with wide-eyed wonder as precious drops of fresh water condense and fall, catching them and crying out that they can now stay alive. The entire crew erupts in celebration, their relief palpable as they finally have fresh water to drink. And they gather around Wendy, thanking her profusely for saving them. Nibor watches her, a look of genuine admiration on his face, telling her she truly impresses him. Wendy's heart flutters at his praise, but their moment of triumph is cut short as a mysterious, dense fog suddenly envelops the ship. The crew descends into panic, screaming in terror that they've sailed into the dreaded demon zone. Nibor remains calm, informing Wendy that his griffin, also named Nibor, can guide them to safety and gives her permission to command it. Without hesitation, Wendy climbs to the highest point of the ship and calls out, ordering the griffin to show them the way. The small creature takes flight, unleashing a brilliant burst of light that pierces through the gloom, growing larger as it charts a course forward. Wendy points the way, but the effort drains her completely. Her vision blurs and she collapses from exhaustion. Nibor shouts her name in alarm and catches her just as she falls. She weakly reassures him that she's fine, just tired, and can call the griffin back. But he ignores her protests, sweeping her into his arms and carrying her below deck. He gently lays her in bed, telling her to sleep without a worry, internally blaming himself for not stopping her from overexerting herself. Wendy asks if he's angry, but he softly replies that he's only proud of her, making her promise that she'll always take care of herself because nothing is more important to him. She asks him to stay with her so she'll get better faster, and he readily agrees, lying beside her and holding her protectively as she drifts off to sleep. 3 days later, their ship docks at the coastal city of Dalrudo. After bidding farewell to the grateful pirates, Nibor and Wendy step onto the docks, only to be warned by a fleeing merchant that the city is cursed and no one should stay. Their path is soon blocked by city guards, who declare that a plague is raging and the city is under quarantine. Peering past them, Wendy is horrified to see soldiers mercilessly cutting down civilians in the streets. A guard shoves her back, barking at her to stop looking and get away before she becomes infected. But before his hand can fully connect, Nibor's hand shoots out, grabbing the guard's wrist with a grip of steel, his face contorted in a cold fury Wendy has never seen before. He furiously demands an explanation for the slaughter, and the guard defiantly says they have no choice but to kill the infected. Nibor's rage boils over as he declares himself the king of Babylon and demands an audience with the city's sovereign. They are led to the house of the sovereign, where a man named Tumen is busy praying. He's shocked to hear the king has arrived, and Nibor immediately confronts him, accusing him of ordering the massacre. Tumen, suspecting an imposter, demands proof of his identity, but his arrogance vanishes when Nibor presents the royal emblem of Babylon. Tumen falls to his knees, begging for forgiveness and explaining he is merely an acting sovereign appointed by the high priest Shamshi. The name clearly registers with Nibor. Taking his seat on the throne, Nibor commands Tumen to stop the killing at once. Tumen desperately argues that the massacre is the only way to contain the plague and prevent all of Babylon from descending into chaos. Nibor pauses, the grim logic of the argument weighing on him. But before he can respond, Wendy steps forward, confidently announcing she knows how to handle the plague. Tumen scoffs at the princess, but she insists that if her methods work, no one will have to die. Nibor, ignoring Tumen's warnings, gives Wendy his complete trust, telling her to do whatever she wants and vowing to take full responsibility if she fails. He has faith in her and she promises not to let him down. Tumen watches this exchange, realizing that if the princess succeeds, the king's power will be solidified, a development he must report to the high priest Shamshi at once. A messenger eagle carries the news to Shamshi, who receives it with a cryptic smile. While elsewhere, a woman is suspiciously questioned about a golden coin. Back in Dalrudo, Wendy introduces her modern knowledge, teaching the terrified citizens how to make face masks to prevent infection, earning their tearful gratitude. She then organizes the city, directing people to sprinkle lime as a disinfectant. For a month, she and Nibor work tirelessly side by side, but the strain is too much. A man reports good news about the declining infection rates only to find Wendy has collapsed, unconscious. Nibor rushes toward her quarantine tent, but guards block his path, pleading with him not to risk infection. He shoves them aside, roaring that the woman in that tent will be his wife and he would never abandon her. He enters to find her deathly still, her body weak and her spirit fading. A doctor gravely informs him that she is in a deep coma, her soul seemingly drifting away from her body. Nibor is crushed, remembering his journey from suspecting her to falling completely in love with her. He clutches her hand, begging her not to leave him alone. In a realm between worlds, Wendy hears his voice calling her back, torn between returning to her own time and the unbearable thought of leaving him heartbroken. For 3 days, Nibor never leaves her side, his voice cracking as he promises to let her go home if she'll only wake up. The constant pressure of his hand on hers finally brings her back, and she slowly opens her eyes, finding a strange endearment in his ragged, grief-stricken appearance. Overwhelmed with relief, he pulls her into a fierce embrace. She gently pushes him away, reminding him she's still a patient, before asking about the plague. A radiant smile spreads across Nibor's face as he takes her hand, promising to show her the city she saved. Princess Amiatis emerges to a chorus of cheers from the grateful crowd, with Nibor calmly explaining that they must disperse to prevent the plague from spreading further. A villager praises her methods, announcing that the plague is finally under control thanks to her, a fact that leaves the princess stunned but overjoyed. The people celebrate them as a perfect match, inviting them to a bonfire festival in their honor. That night under the starry sky, the celebration is in full swing around a massive bonfire. A local man invites the princess for a dance, jesting that his invitation might make someone jealous. Nibor's smile is anything but amused. He steps forward, wrapping a possessive arm around her and declaring that she is supposed to be his queen, asking if the man dares to compete with him. The villagers recoil in fear, but Amyitis quickly diffuses the tension by turning to Nibor and asking him for a dance instead. She mentally berates herself for forgetting he wouldn't know modern etiquette. But Nibor reveals he's seen how people behave in her world through the magic box of her dreams. Proving his point, he gracefully takes her hand and kisses it, saying it would be his pleasure, leaving her to wonder how he could possibly know that. They dance together around the roaring flames, and in a quiet moment, he pulls her into a passionate kiss, whispering that he remembers everything she said while she was in a coma. Their intimacy is shattered by the arrival of a carriage. A handsome priest from Babylon named Shamshi has come to escort them home. He addresses Amyitis not as a princess, but as the divine maiden, an honor bestowed upon her for saving the people of Babylon. As a sign of their gratitude, the villagers present her with a beautiful white gown, which she accepts with a warm smile. Shamshi explains that tradition dictates the divine maiden must ride in the same carriage as the priest. As she steps towards the carriage, her shoe slips and she begins to fall. Shamshi lunges forward to catch her, his face a mask of concern. But before he can reach her, Nibor yanks her back into his arms, coolly suggesting she ride his horse back to Babylon instead. He unapologetically informs Shamshi that he's taking Wendy and that he couldn't care less about the rules, sweeping her onto his horse and riding away. Shamshi is left staring after them, a storm of conflict in his eyes as he wonders what transpired between the king and his princess in Egypt. Back in the Grand Babylon Palace, Nibor finds Wendy rummaging through shelves, trying to find something to eat. He pulls her into his arms from behind, teasing her for making food for others in Egypt but now wanting to cook for herself. She playfully promises to make a meal they can enjoy together. She proudly presents him with a bowl of dumplings, a recipe she learned from a cook in a park back in her hometown. Nibor takes a bite and his eyes light up, declaring it the best thing he's ever eaten and that she must be rewarded. Their moment is broken by Shamshi, who enters and curtly tells Nibor to cut it off, his expression dismayed as he watches their easy intimacy. A concerned subordinate asks if he's all right, but Shamshi simply states that things between Wendy and Nibor are going too smoothly. He presents a truce agreement from Egypt, warning Nibor that the Egyptians are notoriously cunning. As Nibor prepares to leave, Wendy remembers Iset's chain and asks Shamshi for a favor. She shows him a scroll with mysterious markings, asking what they mean. As she points to the text, Shamshi feels a strange pang of affection, a feeling he thinks must be love, and a blush creeps onto his face. Wendy astutely guesses their meaning, impressing him. Shamshi silently resolves that she needs him more than the bossy king, believing he is better for her. Wendy presses him again, desperate to know what the marks say. Shamshi's words are a death sentence to her happiness. He explains that a soul from another world is not allowed to stay, and that a traveler will one day receive instructions from God to return home. The revelation hits Wendy with the force of a physical blow, and she stumbles backward. Shamshi steadies her, but she waves off his concern, blaming it on eating too much and excusing herself to rest. Alone in her chambers, the truth crashes down on her. If she is destined to disappear, she has no right to a future with Nibor, no right to accept his feelings. She collapses onto her bed, tears of despair streaming down her face. Later, Nibor enters quietly, telling a servant not to wake her. He finds her asleep, his fingers gently brushing her cheek as he notices the tear stains, his heart clenching with worry. She stirs awake and he pulls her up, asking why she was crying alone, afraid she thought he would ignore her. He holds her close, promising to arrange a magnificent wedding for them. The word wedding fills her with dread. She knows she has to push him away to lessen his future pain. She shoves him back, her voice cold as she asks who he thinks is going to marry him. When he confirms it's her, reminding her of his promise, she laughs bitterly, telling him he actually believed the lie she fabricated to save them. Nibor's face hardens, accusing her of lying to him. He leans in to kiss her, but she turns away, confessing that she was only pretending to be in love. The lie tastes like ash in her mouth, and she finally snaps, screaming that he's a bastard. With tears filling her eyes, she tells him she only made the compromise because he was domineering and didn't know how to love someone properly, begging him to get away from her. The words strike Nibor harder than any blade. He looks utterly broken, realizing this is how she truly sees him. He whispers, "I see," and turns his back on her, walking away without another word. The moment the door closes, Wendy collapses to the floor, sobbing. In her heart, she screams that she's sorry, that he's the most brilliant man she's ever known, and that she was just too foolish to find another way to keep him from the pain of her inevitable departure. All that's left is her whispered, heartbroken apology. Wendy awakens alone, the empty space beside her a stark reminder of the harsh words she threw at Nibor the previous day. She tries to convince herself that a life without him is for the best, a necessary step to protect her heart, but the attempt is futile as she immediately slumps over, pouting at how much she already misses him. A voice cuts through her thoughts, and she whips around in disbelief to find Nibor standing right there, a calm expression on his face. He wastes no time, taking her hand and telling her he needs to take her somewhere. Wendy is thrown into turmoil, her heart aching as she demands to know why he's here after she declared she didn't love him and called him domineering. Instead of anger, Nibor kneels and presses a gentle kiss to her hand, solemnly vowing that as Nebuchadnezzar, emperor of the empire, he has decided to formally pursue her. This sudden shift from tyrant to suitor leaves Wendy speechless, her heart thumping in her chest as he politely asks to escort her somewhere. He leads her to a massive construction site, revealing his grand plan to build the most magnificent garden the world has ever seen, a hanging garden just for her so she'll never feel homesick again. The weight of his gesture crushes her resolve, and she throws her arms around him, realizing that breaking up with this man would be an agony she couldn't bear. Meanwhile, in the shadowed halls of the divine temple, a man from Egypt named Vardy approaches a priest with a deal. But the priest coldly dismisses him. Vardy's smile turns sinister as he questions the priest's loyalty, revealing knowledge of his secret contact with the Medes and casually mentioning the king's order to build a garden for Princess Amytis, a statement that clearly unnerves the priest as a dark aura surrounds Vardy. Later in the library, Nibor surprises Wendy again, presenting her with the detailed blueprints for the hanging garden. He wraps his arms around her from behind and she shyly admits she likes it. He describes the architectural marvel it will become, a wonder of the world that will stun all who see it. But doubt clouds Wendy's heart. She knows she's destined to disappear and questions if she even deserves this happiness. She probes him, asking if he would still want something he knew he would lose, a loss that would cause more pain than never having it at all. A flicker of darkness crosses Nibor's face, but he quickly pulls her into a tight embrace, declaring that as king, every action he takes is to ensure she never has regrets. He sweeps her into his arms, carrying her to another surprise. He reveals a room overflowing with stunning gowns and priceless jewelry, all for her, explaining they are for a grand ceremony to honor her as the divine maiden of Babylon. Overwhelmed by his relentless affection, Wendy realizes he's trying to soothe the sadness he sensed in her. Fueled by a newfound determination to stop being a coward, she pulls him down for a deep kiss. He whispers for her to stay with him that night, but as he moves closer, she panics, stammering that she isn't ready. He stops instantly, his expression softening as he promises to wait for her, a kindness that makes her heart flutter. But far away, a different story unfolds in violence and rage. The real Amytis screams at a man, accusing him of hitting her and being unfaithful. He retorts with fury, blaming her for letting an impostor take her place in Babylon. He grabs her face, cruelly informing her that the king is hopelessly in love with the woman who stole her life, even building a legendary garden for her. That nobody is now the divine maiden, soon to be queen, while she, the real princess, is trapped in a living hell for her mistake of running away with him. Amytis collapses in despair and disbelief. Her world shattering as her maid confirms the news. Her sorrow twists into a venomous rage. She sees that it's unfair, screaming that she is the true Princess Amytis and vowing to take back what was stolen from her. On the day of the ceremony, the city is alive with celebration. Wendy, radiant as the divine maiden, is greeted by an adoring crowd. As she moves toward the carriage, Nibor steps forward, taking her hand himself in a public display of affection that silences the whispers and earns cheers from the people. But hidden in the crowd, a hooded figure watches with burning hatred. The real Amytis has found her target, her eyes glowing with malevolent intent as the celebration continues, completely unaware of the storm about to break. The celebration shatters in an instant for Wendy, the supposed princess, as a hooded girl bursts from the crowd, screaming that Wendy is a fraud. The accuser throws back her hood, revealing herself to be Amytis and declaring that Wendy has stolen her life. The public erupts in chaos, some calling her a liar while others begin to doubt. Wendy's heart plummets as she sees the accusation register on King Nibor's face, fearing he will now see her as nothing but a fraud. As the crowd's murmurs turn to angry shouts, Nibor makes a decision, coldly ordering his guards to take the girl away for an investigation before commanding the ceremony to resume. Amytis desperately reaches for him, but he coolly avoids her touch, his expression unreadable as he turns away. He rides off with Wendy, leaving Amytis standing alone in utter disbelief, her mind reeling at how he could abandon her so easily. Once the chaotic ceremony concludes, Nibor dispatches his men to find the King of Medes, instructing them to buy him time to handle this unfolding disaster. Back in the throne room, his advisor confronts him, angrily questioning his decision to hold Amytis, warning him that this charade can't last. But their argument is cut short by the arrival of the King of Medes, with the real Amytis by his side. The reunion is tearful, with Amytis sobbing that it was her fault Nibor was tricked by the evil fraud. The King of Medes is enraged, demanding that Nibor kill the impostor and marry his daughter to maintain their alliance. To everyone's shock, Nibor flatly refuses. His advisor pleads with him to consider the political ramifications, even suggesting he marry Amyaitis and simply ignore her, but Nibor is resolute, stating he will not break Wendy's heart. Just then, the high priest intervenes, proposing a compromise. Wendy, despite not being the princess, is still the divine maiden who saved Babylon, so it would be better for her to stay in the divine temple for now. Wendy, anxiously pacing outside, finally peeks into the room, her world crumbling as she sees Nibor standing beside the true princess. Amyaitis smirks, telling Wendy to stop dreaming before Nibor turns on her with icy fury, ordering the liar to get away now. The words hit her like a physical blow, leaving her heartbroken and alone. Cast out of the palace, Wendy is met with jeers from the public, but she faces them with quiet dignity, asking them not to argue and to have faith in their king. Her grace calms the crowd, and a small child even hands her a flower. The high priest watches from afar, impressed by her strength and admitting to himself that his feelings for her remain, princess or not. Later, he brings her food, and a young attendant teases her, suggesting she'd be better off with the kind high priest than with the king who kicked her out. Wendy, flustered, spits her drink, but her faith in Nibor is unshaken as she confidently declares that he will take her back soon. Meanwhile, a woman named Anita schemes with the high priest, offering to help him win Wendy's affection in exchange for his assistance with her own plans. In the palace, Nibor's thoughts are also on Wendy, vowing to himself that he has to get her back soon. Lost and uncertain in the divine temple, Wendy is reminded by her winged companion that she can find the answers she seeks in the misty forest. As she prepares to leave, Amyaitis confronts her again, gloating over her victory. But the high priest appears and cuts her down, reminding her that Wendy is the divine maiden and far more important. He insists on accompanying Wendy to the forest for her safety. There they find the mother griffin, who agrees to answer Wendy's question, revealing a stunning secret. A traveler from another world can only avoid being rejected by this world by having a child here. The implication hits Wendy with full force, realizing the true nature of her connection to Nibor. But their conversation is interrupted by cloaked assassins who see the spiritual beast as a prize to be captured. The mother griffin erupts in a furious rage, preparing to destroy them all. The high priest yells for Wendy to escape, but she refuses to abandon him. Just as the assassins lunge, a volley of arrows pierces the air, felling them instantly. It's Nibor arriving like a savior. He stands before the enraged griffin, swearing as the king of Babylon that they mean no harm, and offers the great beast the very protection of God. Having finally escaped the misty forest, Wendy breathes a sigh of relief. She turns to Nibor, asking if it was truly all right that he gave up the protection of God for her. He smiles, reassuring her that it wasn't the only thing he needed to secure the throne, and playfully notes how worried she seems about him. Overcome with guilt, Wendy apologizes, feeling responsible for him losing something so valuable. But Nibor pulls her into a tight embrace, telling her she's wrong and that he's holding what really matters to him right now. He confesses that after not hearing from her, he had even begun to think she wouldn't come for him. He explains that he had Shamshi send a letter so she could remain in the palace, all while he was busy searching for evidence of Amyaitis' elopement. Just then, Shamshi appears, admitting with an apology that Nibor did write a letter, but he was too preoccupied to deliver it that day. Nibor cuts him off, declaring that he's taking Wendy back to the palace and she won't be returning to the temple. Wendy shyly agrees, wanting to be taken back with him. Shamshi looks concerned, reminding Nibor that the real Amyaitis is still in the palace. But Nibor simply smirks, confident that she'll be gone in a short while. Back at the Babylon palace, the king of Medes complains that the hanging garden should have his symbol since it was built for Amyaitis, but Nibor quickly shushes him, pointing to a sleeping Wendy. He gently lays her down on a nearby couch to rest. The king of Medes erupts in fury, demanding to know how Nibor dared to bring that woman back and questioning if their agreement would be broken for her sake. Nibor calmly turns the question back on him, asking what he means before clapping his hands. A man is dragged forward, and Nibor reveals he knows this man belongs to the largest trading family in Medes, sarcastically giving the king and the man some time to catch up. The king, sweating profusely, insists Nibor knows why Amyaitis disappeared and warns him not to break their deal. Nibor just gives him a knowing smile, asking what he thinks. Later, Wendy awakens, remembering Nibor's permission to roam freely but worrying about causing trouble. She finds him waiting just outside her door, where he casually informs her that the people from Medes have already packed their things and left. Surprised by his speed, she asks how he managed it, but he brushes it off and tells her to come with him for a surprise. He covers her eyes and leads her into a chamber where musicians are waiting. As the music begins, Wendy freezes in shock. It's a song from her homeland from the modern world, the very song that was playing when she first met Andre. Nibor asks if she likes it and she beams, saying she does. He teases her, asking if she likes him or the song, and a flustered Wendy quickly says she likes both. Her mind spins as she asks how he could possibly know that song, and he drops a bombshell. He's known she is an ameitis for a long time. He points out that he's been calling her Wendy, and she's stunned to realize he's right. His memories flash back to modern society where his soul inhabited Andre's body. He remembers seeing her, a woman named Wendy, in a pink dress at a party where they heard this very song. Wendy is confused, recalling that she heard the song with Andre. Nibor explains the truth. It was him inside Andre's body. He had saved her when she was in danger, never expecting her to get together with the man whose body he possessed. The realization washes over Wendy, and she begins to cry tears of joy, understanding that the one she fell in love with was Nibor all along. He asks why she's crying, and she tells him it's from happiness. He pulls her close, calling her his princess, and asks her to dance before leaning in and asking for a kiss, which they share passionately. Later, as they stand under the moonlight, Wendy says she must return to the temple to finish her work. Nibor holds her tight, promising he'll never let her be separated from him again once she returns. Back at the temple, she encounters Shamshi, who is surprised she's still up so late. She apologizes for being distracted by Delight earlier. Shamshi tells her it's fine, admitting that everyone at the temple is fond of her, but then he suddenly collapses. Wendy rushes to his side, horrified to find her hand covered in his blood. A helper checks on him, explaining that a previous injury on his back has ruptured. Guilt floods Wendy's heart as she realizes the injury must be from his confrontation with Griffin's mother. She was so focused on Nibor she completely missed it, and she resolves to check on him. She finds him in bed, deliriously pleading with his mother not to leave him. He grabs her arm, begging her to stay, and she gently reassures him that she will never leave. In his fevered dreams, Shamshi relives the trauma of his past, his parents abandoning him, being hunted after their deaths, and being whipped as a slave. He wakes with a start, wondering why he's dreaming of them now, only to find Wendy asleep at his bedside. A warmth spreads through his chest as he realizes she must be concerned for him, and a single wish forms in his mind. How he wishes Wendy was the first person he saw every time he woke up. Shamshi stirs from unconsciousness to find Wendy watching over him, her hand holding his. She expresses her relief that he's awake, but he pulls his hand away, apologizing for causing trouble. Wendy brushes it off, stating that taking care of each other is what friends do, a word that visibly pains him. As she turns to get him breakfast, he stops her, his voice low and serious. He confesses he's sick of burying his feelings, tired of pretending. Stunned, Wendy asks what he means. Shamshi poses a heartbreaking question. If he had met her first, if he had stayed with her instead of sending her back to Nibor, would she have fallen for him? Her panicked reaction is immediate. She stammers that they're just friends. Her rejection is gentle but firm, admitting she loves Nibor, and as for Shamshi's feelings, she cannot return them. Shamshi forces a laugh, quickly backtracking and claiming it was all a joke affected by the attack. Wendy, clutching her chest, breathes a sigh of relief, believing his lie as she leaves to get his breakfast. But the moment she's gone, Shamshi's mask crumbles. He grips his head in anguish, muttering that he failed. Just as he sinks into despair, a voice cuts through the silence. A man named Vardy appears, mocking the high priest for being depressed over a woman and presenting him with a letter containing the news he's been waiting for. Vardy reveals a devastating truth he uncovered. The slave dealers in Babylon all worked for a few royal families, and the one Shamshi was sent to belong to Nibor's family. A flashback of his parents begging for his life flashes through his mind as Vardy coldly explains they were stabbed to death, and that Nibor himself was the one who killed them. Pure, unadulterated rage consumes Shamshi, his eyes glowing with murderous intent. Vardy then asks if he will work with Egypt to bring down the corrupt Babylonian nobility. Fueled by vengeance, Shamshi declares he will replace Nibor and rebuild Babylon himself. Meanwhile, in a blooming garden, Nibor, now called Nick, teases Wendy about planning their wedding when he's actually engaged to Princess Ameitis. He delights in her flustered reaction, calling her adorable before placing a crown of flowers on her head. From the shadows, Shamshi watches them, his gaze filled with hatred as he vows to save Wendy from the phony liar she loves. Their idyllic moment is shattered by a frantic messenger who reports that the Jewish kingdom has broken their alliance, sided with Egypt, and launched an attack. Nick's face hardens with resolve, and he furiously vows to storm Jerusalem himself to make them pay for their betrayal. Wendy kneels in prayer for his safety when Shamshi appears beside her, telling her not to worry. Remembering his words, she stands, declaring that since she is the divine maiden, she will bless Nick herself. Before he departs with his army, she begs him to be safe, knowing he's no longer invincible. He promises to return in triumph and cheekily asks for a lucky kiss. She grants his wish, pulling him down from his horse and blessing his victory in the name of the divine maiden. To distract her from her worry, a maid suggests she make blessing pendants, leading them to the material warehouse. As Wendy selects a green sachet she thinks Nick will like, she feels a strange presence and overhears voices nearby. Peeking around a shelf, she is horrified to see Shamshi confronting a guard named Valent. Valent accuses the high priest of being the only one who could have mobilized the troops that day, demanding to know his plan. Wendy freezes, realizing Shamshi orchestrated the entire conflict. Shamshi coldly confirms no one else knows, then declares Valent is the only problem left to fix. He unleashes a blinding light from his staff, striking Valent and bringing him under his complete control. The now subservient Valent kneels before him. As Wendy reels in shock, Shamshi senses her presence and calls out into the room. She hides behind a roll of fabric, praying Nick will save her, just as a sword blade pierces through the material inches from her face. After Valent reports the room is empty, Shamshi dismisses his feeling as paranoia and leaves. Wendy collapses to the floor, her legs trembling with fear, only to look up in terror as she hears yet another sound from the shadows. Brody's cheerful voice cuts through the silence, startling Wendy as he asks what she's doing here. He playfully accuses her of doing something bad, noting her frightened expression, but Wendy's mind is on something far more grave. She cuts him off, her voice trembling with urgency as she delivers the devastating news. Shamshi has betrayed them. The color drains from Brody's face, his playful demeanor vanishing in an instant as he tells her she must leave the palace immediately. Confused, Wendy can only stammer, but he insists she must go to Nick, the king of Babylon, believing he is the only one who can bring light back to their world. Wendy begs Brody to escape with her, but he stands firm, reminding her of his duty as the chancellor to remain in the city. Fear grips her as she warns him that Shamshi might use mind control, but Brody reassures her that the technique isn't perfect, and besides, Shamshi needs him to keep the city stable. Their clandestine meeting is shattered by the sound of approaching guards. Valent is coming. Brody shoves Wendy toward a horse, ordering her to follow his instructions precisely. With a final, determined glance, Wendy vows to bring the king back before galloping into the night, leaving Brody to face their pursuers alone. Valent appears, pressing a golden scepter to Brody's throat and demanding to know where Wendy went. Brody feigns ignorance, claiming he was merely taking a walk. But Valent isn't fooled, his voice dripping with menace as he says he's serious. Unflinching, Brody challenges him to act on his threat, prompting Valent to order his guards to imprison him. Valent sneers that he doesn't need an answer anyway, knowing the only place she'd flee is to Nick, and promptly commands a soldier named Valent to follow her trail. Meanwhile, at a border town of the Jewish kingdom, a disguised Wendy tries to slip past the guards, but one stops her, noting her resemblance to a wanted poster. He unfurls the parchment, revealing a ridiculously ugly caricature that sends Wendy into a silent, Chibai-esque rage. Just as she's about to be exposed, a firm hand grasps her wrist. A man with long dark hair smoothly tells the guard she's mentally ill and that he's taking her home. As he leads her away, Wendy stares in shock, realizing it's Nick. Overcome with relief, she throws her arms around him, frantically explaining that Shamshi has staged a coup and they must return to save Babylon. Nick calmly strokes her hair, assuring her that everything will be fine and that he never left without a plan in place. Back in Babylon, Brody, now revealed as Prince Gale, rallies the warriors to defend their home, ordering a tactical retreat to infuriate their enemy, a move that sends the opposing commander into a fit of rage. At the border, Nick explains to Wendy that Prince Gale is helping because he would lose his only rival if Nick were to die. Seeing that Wendy's foot is injured, Nick declares the area unsafe and before she can protest, sweeps her into his arms, telling her to rest as he carries her to safety. Inside a safe room, he orders servants for hot water and kneels to tend to her wounded foot himself. Overwhelmed by his kindness and remembering Brody's faith in him, Wendy begins to cry, and Nick pulls her into a tight embrace, whispering that her tears are breaking his heart. Their moment is interrupted when a soldier bursts in to report that their attack on Jerusalem has failed. Nick smirks, remarking that their enemies are personally inviting him to storm their capital. Seizing the opportunity, Wendy announces she has an idea. Later, Nick gently dismisses her offer, telling her to rest while he handles it, leaving Wendy frustrated and determined to prove her worth. She finds her way to the war room just in time to see Nick explode in fury at his useless counselors, his eyes blazing with impatience. She strides in, scroll in hand, announcing she can create a secret weapon. The generals scoff at the idea of a woman knowing anything about war, but Wendy retorts they shouldn't be so judgmental. After the generals plead with Nick to be wise, she worries he too will dismiss her. Instead, he calmly asks about her weapon. Hopeful, she unfurls the scroll, revealing a plan for a giant wooden griffin to be used as a Trojan horse, allowing their soldiers to infiltrate Jerusalem and open the gates from within. The generals are stunned by the brilliant strategy, but Nick's face remains unreadable as he dismisses them. Once they are alone, he corners her, asking if he's supposed to disapprove of women in politics like his men do, before leaning in and whispering that he wants to kiss her. He praises all her creations, from water wheels to war strategies, declaring her his queen and his alone before capturing her lips in a passionate kiss. The magnificent wooden griffin stands complete, a testament to Wendy's strategy, but her relief is short-lived. The soldiers stare at the behemoth with fear, wondering who would dare enter it and if they could possibly survive breaching the enemy city. Wendy's heart sinks as she realizes no one is willing to volunteer, rendering her entire plan useless. Just as despair sets in, a confident voice cuts through the murmurs. Nibor declares that he will be the one to go inside the griffin, determined to prove that the king was right to trust a woman's plan. Wendy rushes to his side, pleading with him that the risk is far too great. But Nibor, the king of Babylon, firmly states that he must set an example for his people. She desperately reminds him that he's no longer protected by the gods, that he is just a mortal man now. But he simply smiles, calling her his queen and asking her to trust him and pray for his success. He pulls her close, sealing his promise with a kiss and telling her to wait outside the city, while she warns him that she will never forgive him if he doesn't make it back. With renewed vigor, Nibor rallies his warriors, and a chorus of voices eagerly volunteers to follow him into the jaws of death. Watching him go, Wendy makes a silent vow. If he can just come back safely, she will stay and marry him. Hours later, under the cover of night, the wooden griffin is successfully pulled within the walls of Jerusalem. Hiding in the bushes, Wendy can only watch and trust Nibor to complete the mission. As dawn approaches with no sign of him, her companion grows anxious, fearing their scheme has been discovered and the king captured. A horrifying vision of a bloodied, impaled Nibor flashes through Wendy's mind, a possibility she violently rejects. The soldiers begin to talk of retreat, suggesting they wait for Prince Gale, but Wendy stands firm, insisting they must have faith in their king. Her subordinate turns on her, sneering that she's just a woman whose foolish hope will get them all killed as he brandishes a dagger. Before he can force her, a cry erupts from the camp. The gates are opening, the king is coming out. As the massive doors swing wide, Babylonian soldiers charge into the fray, and Wendy frantically scans the chaos for any sign of Nibor. A voice calls her name, inviting her to embrace their victory, and she looks up to see Nibor standing tall and triumphant in the gateway. Overwhelmed with relief, she runs to him, knowing he has succeeded against all odds. He gently pushes her away, explaining he's covered in blood. And though she panics thinking he's hurt, he clarifies it belongs to his enemies. She doesn't care, throwing her arms around him and confessing she feared she would never see him again. He asks what she would have done had he failed, and she tearfully repeats her promise to stay in Babylon for him forever, so long as he returned. Later, in the conquered Jewish palace, the defeated leaders kneel before them, begging for forgiveness and blaming the Egyptians for forcing their hand. One even offers to become a spy, but Nibor only scoffs at his cowardice, before the man makes a final, desperate offer, the beautiful princess of the Jewish kingdom. As dancers are presented, Wendy's heart clenches with jealousy, thinking Nibor hardly needs more women. But Nibor explodes in fury, roaring that his heart belongs only to his wife and ordering the traitors to be thrown in prison. Afterwards, Wendy observes the captured Princess Livy, feeling a pang of sympathy for the girl who has lost her country. When Nibor finds her, she turns away coldly, suggesting he find comfort with his new princesses. He simply smiles, knowingly asking if she's jealous. He pulls her into his arms, reassuring her that he only wants her, his true wife, a statement she tries to deny. He playfully reminds her of her promise to marry him, a promise his entire army heard. And as she blushes, he sweeps her off her feet, whispering that she can't take it back and will be his by morning. Far away in the Egyptian palace, a ruler learns of Wendy's successful strategy, convinced she is the underworld wife destined for him and vowing to take back what is his. Back in Babylon, Wendy shivers on Nibor's throne, telling him she feels as if someone just called her name. He dismisses it as fatigue and carries her away as his subjects praise her as their goddess of war. She feels embarrassed, but he confirms she is a great contributor to their victory. In the Grand Hall, their victory tour continues as the Jewish leaders plead for their lives. Nibor's justice is swift and brutal. He agrees to spare one man's life only after forcing him to watch all his sons be executed before having his own eyes gouged out. Horrified, Wendy tries to look away as Nibor shields her from the sight of men being dragged to their deaths. She pleads with him to show mercy, but he coldly explains that enemies left alive will only return for revenge. Needing a moment, Wendy excuses herself, saying she wants to appreciate the flowers. She finds Princess Livy and tells her to escape, explaining that she simply doesn't want to see anyone she knows die. At that moment, a nearby monument cracks, and the necklace around Wendy's neck burns with a sudden heat. Shoving the princess away, she tells her to just go. Nibor finds her and she covers by saying she was making a wish. He remarks on her attachment to the necklace and she reveals its secret. It is a key back to her own time. She tells him she wished for a future without war, confessing she'd rather have peace than be hailed as a goddess of war, knowing the pain of orphans all too well. Nibor then asks if she hates him for all the killing, a deep-seated fear that she blames him for his cruelty. To his surprise, Wendy agrees with his methods, acknowledging that threats must be eliminated. Relieved and grateful, he pulls her into a deep kiss, promising to always keep her wish for peace in his mind. As Nibor rides through the ranks of his soldiers, he pulls Wendy onto his horse, telling her they are finally going home. But his expression turns serious as he pulls her close, warning her to be careful. He confides that their every plan to conquer Jerusalem has been leaked, and he's certain there is an Egyptian spy in their army. Wendy's mind races, wondering what she could possibly do to help. Nibor leans in, his voice a low command, asking if she will cooperate or if he needs to repeat himself like before. She hastily agrees, understanding the need for secrecy to avoid alerting the spy, only for Nibor to erupt in laughter. He calls her a cutie, finding her panicked earnestness adorable, which only serves to make her more annoyed. Later that night, under a full moon, a servant informs Wendy they will rest there for the night. But the peace is shattered in an instant as a cry of raid rings out and a guard is struck down beside her. Wendy freezes in terror as an enemy archer takes aim directly at her heart. Nibor screams her name and lunges forward, acting as a human shield as an arrow sinks deep into his back. He collapses into her arms and she desperately cries for help, cradling his limp body. Inside a tent, a healer works frantically but ultimately tells Wendy there's nothing he can do. Nibor is dying. Despair washes over her as she weeps, her world crumbling. She leans over his body, whispering apologies, blaming herself for his fate. The men file out, leaving them alone, but one of them casts a triumphant smirk from the tent's entrance. The moment the flap closes, Nibor sits up, perfectly fine, and asks with a grin how his performance was. Before Wendy can even process the betrayal, he grabs her hand and places it on his chest, reassuring her that his heart is still beating strongly for her. Outside, the traitorous soldier releases a bird, sending a message to the pharaoh that the king of Babylon has been murdered. He turns to leave but is confronted by a mysterious hooded figure. Back in the command tent, a soldier kneels before Nibor, reporting that the spy has been captured. Nibor explains he'd suspected the man for ages, as his strategic advice was always disastrously wrong. He reveals the shocking truth: the traitor works for Nico, who has formed an alliance with Shamshi. Wendy holds him close, swearing she will never betray him. As he reassures her, she suddenly detects the scent of blood. She looks closer and sees that while the arrow was a ruse, he was still injured in the chaos. He tries to dismiss her tears, but she fiercely declares that she will protect him now. Playfully punishing him for his deception, a servant walks in on their intimate moment, immediately apologizing for the interruption. Wendy is mortified, but as she touches Nibor's chest, a warm golden light erupts from her hand. The wound heals completely in an instant, leaving them both stunned. He stares at his unblemished skin, whispering that it's a miracle. Miles away in the Egyptian palace, the pharaoh receives word of Nibor's victory over Jerusalem. A cruel smile plays on his lips as he tells his advisor to pass on his congratulations for what will be Nibor's final achievement. Nibor, ecstatic over Wendy's newfound power, lifts her into his arms, calling her a goddess. But Wendy's joy turns to horror as she sees her arms becoming transparent again. Realizing her healing power is draining her very existence, Nibor's expression hardens, and he forbids her from ever healing him again, vowing to handle everything himself. Meanwhile, in a divine temple, the Egyptian god is confronted by Nico, who demands Wendy's return as a favor. When the god refuses, Nico coolly points out that as long as Nibor lives, their plans are worthless, forcing them into a dark alliance. The god's rage is interrupted by a messenger who reports that Nibor survived the attack but is now in a coma. Seizing the opportunity, the god declares the sacred war has begun, ordering his man Valiant to prepare a trap for the king. Back in the military camp, Wendy clings to Nibor, terrified of losing him without a goodbye. He comforts her while a soldier bandages his minor wounds. Just then, his men announce they've reached the capital's entrance. Nibor asks if she's scared, but Wendy's gaze is filled with grim resolve, glad that they can finally take their revenge. The carriage rolls through the gates of Babylon, carrying the gravely wounded King Nibor. Inside, Wendy whispers to his unconscious form that they've finally made it back home, her hand resting reassuringly on his. Outside, the crowd erupts in cheers, celebrating the return of their queen, whom they call Rani. Wendy acknowledges their praise with a calm smile, but a cold realization washes over her as she takes in the massive crowd. Shamshi has prepared a grand and undoubtedly dangerous reception for them. Standing before them is the high priest Shamshi himself, his posture defiant and disrespectful as he refuses to bow. Wendy leans over Nibor, telling him not to fear as she is still by his side. She then steps out, her voice ringing with authority as she demands to know why Shamshi isn't kneeling for his king. Shamshi coolly dismisses the formality, claiming the king's critical condition makes manners irrelevant, and moves to check on him himself. But Wendy sees through the facade. His true goal is to seize control of the military. He looms over Nibor, his thoughts venomous, sneering that whether the king is truly unconscious or just faking, he has already lost his chance. Wendy quickly intervenes, her mind racing as she realizes Shamshi is testing Nibor. He grabs her, his voice a low hiss, asking why she still rejects him, vowing he'll never forgive a traitor. He tells her to go and rest, but she stands her ground, refusing to leave. Shamshi then turns to the crowd and boldly announces that the king's condition is stable, a declaration that earns a massive cheer. Wendy stares in disbelief, shocked by his audacity. He subtly probes her, asking if she knows what to say, but she simply plays the part of the tired queen, internally marveling at her own acting ability. Inside the palace, Shamshi's true plan unfolds as he orders Valent to take the king to his chamber. Wendy's eyes widen in fury. She knows he intends to imprison him. Shamshi smirks, confirming her fears by stating Nibor will never leave that room again. When she tries to follow, he stops her, declaring she will stay with him. Her response is a sharp slap across his face. His expression darkens as he warns her that Nibor's very life depends on her behavior. He grabs her chin, his voice dripping with false sympathy as he tells her she'll one day realize Nibor doesn't deserve her love, pulling her into a cold embrace. As tears stream down her face, Wendy's resolve hardens. She vows to save her king. Later, in Nibor's heavily guarded room, Wendy pleads to see him, but Shamshi blocks her path. He seethes with jealousy, demanding to know why she always chooses Nibor over him. But just as he grabs her, Nibor suddenly sits up, his voice weak but firm, warning Shamshi not to dare hurt Wendy. Wendy rushes to his side, gently pushing him down and assuring him she can handle the situation. After she furiously orders Shamshi to leave, Nibor reveals his own plan, apologizing for what she's endured and asking for a favor. He hands her a dagger, a token to contact Brody and the guerrillas, explaining that Shamshi had intercepted his last messenger. Wendy accepts without a second thought, promising to deliver it. He urges her to be careful, telling her that she is more important than any plan, a sentiment she tearfully returns. As soon as she leaves, Shamshi enters the prison where the chancellor, Brody, is being held. Wendy, ever watchful, follows and spies from behind a corner. Shamshi offers Brody a deal, serve him and he might spare the king's life. Brody scoffs, refusing to serve a traitor and daring Shamshi to try and control him with his staff. Enraged by the defiance, Shamshi draws his sword, offering one last chance. Brody remains unyielding, declaring he will never compromise his integrity. Just as Shamshi roars that his integrity can go to hell, Wendy bursts in, stopping the execution. She places herself in front of Brody, her eyes blazing as she demands to know how many more people Shamshi will kill. She pleads with him, promising she can persuade Brody to join them. Shamshi coolly replies that he doesn't need him anymore, but Wendy argues that Brody's knowledge is indispensable. Turning to Brody, who is stunned to see her, she tearfully begs him to say yes, presenting the dagger as a sign of Nibor's supposed defeat. Brody is horrified, accusing her of betraying the king. Wendy plays her part perfectly, crying that as a mere girl she had no choice. Her performance is convincing, and Brody finally relents, kneeling before Shamshi to pledge his loyalty. But Shamshi is not so easily fooled. He looks down at the kneeling chancellor, stating that he feels no sincerity and demands a final, horrifying test of loyalty. Brody must throw Nibor into prison and torture him. The cruel command leaves both Wendy and Brody utterly shocked. As they reel from the order, a guard suddenly runs in with urgent news. The king is awake. Shamshi smirks with satisfaction, pleased that his prey Nibor has walked right into the prison he prepared. Wendy desperately pleads with Shamshi, reminding him of the kindness Nibor once showed him, but Shamshi only scoffs at the memory. He questions what kindness he ever needed, bursting into manic laughter as he declares them all fools, deceived by that hypocrite Nibor. Wendy watches in confusion, unable to comprehend the depths of Shamshi's hatred for the man. When Brody tries to make them leave, Wendy insists on staying, believing she can stop the impending violence. Shamshi coldly grants her permission, warning her not to be disappointed when she sees the weak and cowardly side of her hero. They enter the dungeon to a horrific sight. Nibor is crucified, his arms bound to a massive wooden cross. With cruel intent, Shamshi hands a whip to a stunned Brody, ordering him to prove his loyalty by flogging Nibor and erasing any bond they once had. Brody recoils, refusing to ever harm an injured man. Seeing his hesitation, Wendy rushes forward, shielding Nibor with her own body and declaring that if Shamshi wants to punish him, he'll have to go through her first. Nibor, though wounded, tells her to move, insisting he can take the pain as the king of Babylon. He clarifies that he submits not out of fear, but to protect his people, vowing to one day reclaim his glory. This noble display only enraged Shamshi, who screams that he has always hated Nibor's righteous act and shoves the whip back at Brody. As Brody hesitates, Nibor fixes him with a steely gaze, commanding him as his king to strike without fear. With a pained apology, Brody raises the whip and brings it down with a sickening crack. Shamshi watches with a cold smile, wondering just how long Nibor can endure. Lash after lash falls upon Nibor's back, and the sight is too much for Wendy, who cries out his name before collapsing to the stone floor. Later, in a secluded alley, a disguised Brody reports to a man named Gale that Nibor has been imprisoned and flogged. Gale explodes in fury, grabbing Brody and demanding to know why he betrayed them, but Brody can only choke out that Shamshi forced his hand. Gale tells him to prepare as their own plans will soon be set in motion before Brody rushes off to check on Wendy. He finds her in the palace, very much awake, and she reveals she only faked fainting to stop Shamshi's relentless torture. She begs Brody to take her to Nibor, but he argues that it would jeopardize their plan, as Nibor was intentionally bearing the pain to make Shamshi lower his guard. Wendy refuses to listen, unable to bear the thought of him suffering alone. Back in the dungeon, Shamshi taunts the still-conscious Nibor, marveling at his resilience before pressing his staff against his wounds. Nibor declares he is willing to abdicate the throne to stop their conflict from tearing Babylon apart. But Shamshi just laughs, calling him a pathetic hypocrite. The hatred in Shamshi's eyes is terrifying as he confesses how much he wishes to kill the trusting fool he used to be. He promises to show Nibor true desperation and orders his guards to break the king's fingers. As Wendy and Brody race to the prison, she senses danger and their path is suddenly blocked by guards. Brody draws his sword, telling her to run ahead while he holds them off. In the dungeon, Shamshi grabs Nibor's face, sneering that Wendy won't want him once he's disabled. But Nibor retorts that she would never choose a coward and a traitor like Shamshi. Enraged, Shamshi's staff erupts in flames, but just as he's about to strike a killing blow, Wendy bursts in and takes the hit herself. She rushes to Nibor's side, relieved she made it in time, completely ignoring the stunned Shamshi. Furious at being treated as if he were invisible, Shamshi grabs Wendy by the throat, warning her she'll suffer for defying him. A primal roar escapes Nibor's lips as he demands she be released. And with a surge of impossible strength, he begins to strain against his bonds, splintering the wooden cross. While Shamshi is distracted, Wendy slaps him hard across the face, screaming that she despises him and loves Nibor because he respects her. Amused by her fire, Shamshi grabs her wrist, declaring that she is his. With a final explosive effort, Nibor shatters the cross and breaks free. Shamshi stares in disbelief, wondering how he moved under divine magic, as Nibor roars for him to get his hands off Wendy. Wendy steps between them, pushing Shamshi back and begging them both to stop. She pleads for Nibor's life, but Shamshi coldly states that he has sworn to show no mercy. She asks why they can't make peace, but Shamshi grabs her, shouting that he'll never forgive those who hurt his parents and that she must now choose. He demands to know if she likes him, telling her to pursue a real man and not give him a reason to despise her. With her decision made, Wendy turns to Nibor with a reassuring smile, telling him to trust her. Later, under the night sky, Shamshi takes Wendy for a walk through the capital, musing that she's like a precious bird he's kept caged for too long. Children greet him warmly, thanking him for providing food during the war. Shamshi explains that the people prefer peace, unlike the warlord Nibor. Wendy snaps back that the peace they enjoy was paid for by the blood of Nibor and his soldiers. Stung by her words, Shamshi asks if she thinks he's weak before changing his approach. He extends a hand, asking her to give him a chance. Wendy slowly takes his hand, and Shamshi pulls her into an embrace, believing he has finally won. Under the starry sky, Wendy cheekily asks Shamshi if his nose still hurts, but he ignores the jab, his eyes fixed on her as he declares he will woo her and win her over sooner or later. Her expression turns serious, and she demands to know why there's such a bitter feud between him and Nibor. Shamshi's face darkens with a chilling resolve, his voice cold as he states that a murderer must repay with his life. Wendy is stunned, realizing their conflict is a deadly one, and she decides she must ask Nibor about it herself. Later, in the torchlit corridors of a prison, her loyal friend Brody leads her through the halls, noting the new guards and urging her to hurry since their time is limited. She finally reaches the cell and finds Nibor inside, rushing to his side with his name on her lips. Her eyes fall upon a wound on his hand, and she immediately channels her healing power, a bright light emanating from her palm. But Nibor grabs her wrist, stopping her mid-motion, steadfastly refusing to let her sacrifice her own life force to heal him. Wendy insists, her eyes pleading, telling him she'll be genuinely upset if he doesn't let her help. She argues that helping the one she loves isn't a sacrifice, and her words pierce his heart, making him whisper that she is amazing and he can't help but love her. He gently reminds her of their promise to take care of themselves, pointing out that while he fulfilled his side, she's the one who got hurt. He reveals that his injury was merely part of a plan, but his heart truly ached seeing her with Shamshi. Wendy quickly refutes this, explaining she was only snooping for intelligence and that her heart belongs only to him, which would be embarrassing if Nibor ever found out. Moved, Nibor lifts her hand and kisses it tenderly, his expression then turning grim as he recalls Shamshi's chilling words about a murderer's debt. Wendy holds his hand, urging him to remain patient and act rationally, as they still haven't caught the mastermind behind everything. Meanwhile, in the Egyptian palace, Prince Gale is informed that Nibor has been severely injured. The high priest smirks, cynically remarking on the impatience of the Babylon war. He chastises Gale for imprisoning Wendy and disabling Nibor, warning that their ally, the new king of Babylon, will be displeased. But Gale scoffs at the idea of honoring a covenant now that Nibor is dying, sneering that the fool Shamshi doesn't deserve Wendy. With a manic look in his eyes, Gale declares he will personally lead his army to destroy the capital of the Babylon kingdom. Back in the bustling bazaar, Shamshi suddenly appears before Wendy, boldly proclaiming that he will become the new king of Babylon, with or without her consent. Cornered, Wendy makes a desperate gamble, offering to marry him if he promises to do one thing for her. Shamshi eagerly agrees, and she makes him swear on it, secretly hoping she's bought enough time for Nick. Shamshi is ecstatic, promising her the most magnificent wedding imaginable. Later in the palace hall, a triumphant Shamshi orders Brody to prepare for both his ascension and the wedding, sadistically relishing the thought of seeing his loyal chancellor, Nibur, bend to his will. Brody seethes, clenching his fists in silent rage as Shamshi commands him to bring Nibur to meet Gale. Brody then rushes to Wendy, whispering that he needs her to keep Shamshi occupied. Wendy, resolute, agrees to do anything for Nick. Just as Brody is about to explain his plan, a guard grabs him violently by the hair, causing Wendy to cry out in shock. But a familiar voice cuts through her panic, and she realizes with a jolt that the guard is Nick in disguise. Overwhelmed with relief, she throws herself into his arms, telling him how much she's missed him. Brody quickly reminds them they are short on time. Nick pulls Wendy into a deep kiss, promising to return soon, vowing they'll never be separated again once it's all over. Just as Nick and Brody turn to leave, Shamshi appears, his sudden presence startling Wendy. Brody quickly improvises, claiming they were preparing for the ceremony. Shamshi eyes the disguised Nick with suspicion, noting he's never seen such a burly warrior in the palace before. Panicking that their plan is about to be exposed, Wendy grabs Shamshi's arm and creates a distraction, suggesting they go look at her wedding dress. The thought of Wendy in a wedding dress is enough to completely derail Shamshi's train of thought, and he becomes flustered with excitement. Watching them leave, Nick is consumed by a burning rage at the thought of Shamshi seeing her in that dress before he does. Brody grabs his shoulder, urging him to calm down and not waste the precious opportunity Wendy has created. Nick takes a breath, his gaze hardening with determination as he vows not to let her efforts be in vain. Later, Wendy stands before Shamshi in her wedding gown, looking beautiful but distant. She wonders if Nick would praise her if he were here. At that moment, she overhears a nearby conversation and realizes with horror that the high priest has set a trap, and Nick's plan has been exposed. Shamshi notices her pale face, but she brushes it off, claiming the dress is too tight. Her mind racing to find a way to warn Nick. She makes a run for it, leaving a bewildered Shamshi who decides to follow her himself. Wendy finds some children in the bazaar and devises a clever plan, telling them to play a game to find a hidden gem by shouting the phrase, "Where's Wendy's gem? Here's Wendy's gem." Nick and Brody hear the coded message and immediately understand that their plan is compromised and must be changed. Brody splits off to get help, confirming with an ally that their chancellor is not a traitor. As they move toward a secret entrance, Nick draws his sword and confronts Prince Gale's men. Brody rejoins him, and together the two brothers declare it's time to fight back. While they battle, Wendy prays that Nick received her hint, only to be grabbed from behind by a furious Shamshi. He demands to know why she can't love him, his voice cracking with desperation. Wendy tells him bluntly that she never could and only stays for Nick's sake, confessing that she doesn't even belong in this world. Shamshi's face contorts with a dark understanding as he recalls the Griffin's words about forging a connection to this world. Enraged by her rejection, he shoves her, screaming that she will stay for him. He slams her against a stone wall, her body slumping to the ground in terror as she realizes he's gone completely mad. She cowers, helpless and alone, crying out for Nick to save her from Shamshi's terrifying obsession. Brody rushes to Wendy, his expression grim as he confirms her worst fears. They have arrived safely, but a new crisis is unfolding. He reports that Shamshi has just made a public announcement, declaring their king, Nibur, too ill to perform his duties and that he will abdicate the throne. Wendy is stunned, asking if the nobles actually believe this lie. Brody explains Shamshi's genius political maneuver. He used the public's trust in them, Wendy, the beloved of the king, and Brody, his most loyal minister, to lend credibility to his lies. Brody laments that they are now both unwittingly rooting for Shamshi in the eyes of the people. He tells Wendy not to overthink it, that he and Nibur will handle everything, but her anxiety spikes when she realizes Nibur hasn't returned yet. A wave of self-doubt washes over her. She feels like a coward whenever Nibur isn't by her side. Before Brody can reassure her, he is called away, told that a stand-in has been placed in the palace and he must work with Gale. As he departs, Wendy is left alone with her fears, only to be accosted by whispering court ladies. They call her a shameful woman, already thinking of marrying someone else so soon after the king fell ill, relieved he never married her in the first place. Wendy, tears welling in her eyes, bites back that they know nothing. She wipes her tears, her sadness hardening into resolve, declaring that she doesn't need their understanding as long as Nibur knows she is innocent. Determined to see the truth for herself, she walks into the bazaar. where the apathy and misunderstanding of the people only strengthen her will to never give up. Suddenly, a young boy tugs at her sleeve, asking if it's true that she abandoned his majesty. When she confirms it, he refuses to believe it, declaring she's the best person he knows and that the high priest must be worthy if she would marry him. As rain begins to fall, the boy shields her head with his hands, promising to get her an umbrella. Just as she feels the weight of the world crushing her, a real umbrella appears over her head, held by a familiar hand. It's Nibor. She questions why he's there, warning him that he can't be seen. He pulls her into a close embrace, whispering that he couldn't let others see how beautiful she is and that he's sorry she has to bear everything alone. Wendy's joy overflows, telling him he has no idea how happy she is to see him and that he isn't the tyrant Shamshi claims him to be. He gently strokes her hair, calling her his silly girl. As the rain stops, a rainbow appears and Wendy sees it as a sign that their plan will work. Nibor pulls her close, promising he's there for her now. Their tender moment is shattered when guards spot them, and two frantic figures realize all their efforts will be for naught if they are caught. Brody and an ally act fast, kicking over massive barrels of water to create a chaotic diversion, knocking the guards off their feet. As they high-five, Brody notes that this was a one-time save, reflecting on how their plan to control public opinion was working slowly. Nibor grabs Wendy's hand, telling her not to look back as they flee into an alley. Once hidden, Wendy confirms the guards are gone. Nibor cups her face, asking if she missed him. She worriedly asks if it's truly okay for him to be seen, but he simply states that he came because he was worried. She embraces him, realizing he's only human and gets scared sometimes. He holds her tighter, confessing his own worry and regret that he didn't just take her away from all this. He leans in for a desperate kiss, begging her never to leave him. She promises she won't, then her expression turns serious as she remembers Shamshi's threat about knowing how to keep her in the palace. At the Imperial Palace, Shamshi's patience wears thin. He demands to know how long the ceremony will take, and Brody explains the flowers need a month to arrive. Shamshi draws his sword, giving him a 3-day deadline or his life. The tense standoff is interrupted by a panicked report. The Egyptian army is approaching the capital. The news that Nico has arrived so soon forces Brody's hand. Their plan can't be delayed any longer. Shamshi sees this as his golden opportunity. Declaring it's inevitable, he replaces Nibor, and Brody feigns agreement, stating they need a great king to lead them. Later, in a secret meeting, Brody informs a hooded figure of Shamshi's accelerated timeline. Nibor reveals himself, a cold fury in his eyes. He declares the time for waiting is over. He is the guardian of Babylon, not a coward, and he won't make Wendy wait a moment longer. In the palace, Shamshi seethes, realizing Nico is not coming as an ally but as an enemy, which means he must take the throne immediately to rally the forces. Just as he solidifies his resolve, his men arrive, dragging a captive Nibor behind them. Shamshi grabs him by the chin, mocking his stubborn eyes and vowing that he will watch him take the throne and marry Wendy. The day of the ceremony arrives. Shamshi greets Wendy, calling her his stunning goddess. He leans in close, whispering that whether she agrees or not, she will be his woman from this moment on. In the lockups, Nibor can only think of Wendy, apologizing for not protecting her well enough. Standing before the public, Shamshi begins his speech, announcing that their king was seriously injured. He paints himself as the nation's savior, the one who will lead them to victory. But his speech is interrupted by Brody, who incites the crowd, demanding to see the king for themselves. Shamshi tries to placate them, claiming the king is in a coma, but the seeds of doubt are sown. He declares he will be the new king to defeat the invaders, and for a moment, the crowd rallies behind him. Watching the tides turn again, Wendy knows she has to act. She snatches a sword from a nearby guard and charges forward, denouncing Shamshi as a liar who betrayed Nibor for power. She declares to the stunned crowd that their true king is imprisoned in the dark chamber behind him. Shamshi scoffs, telling her not to be silly, that Nibor isn't there. But a calm voice cuts through the tension, stating, "But I am." Nibor walks out from the shadows, alive and unharmed. Shamshi's face contorts in pure shock and disbelief. Standing beside a relieved Wendy, Nibor looks at his rival with cold finality, declaring that Shamshi's day of dreaming is over.